They come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I fought a dog that killed the calf that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dana Gould Hour Podcast. It's the holidays. The election is over, and although I haven't been paying much attention to the news, I'm sure that everything turned out what? Oh well. It was fun while it lasted. But hey, I'm still me and you're still you, so let's be who we are and do what we do. Bob Fingerman is here. Bob is an old pal and one of the finest comic artists in the biz. Bob gained fame in the 1990s with his comic Minimum Wage, which was one of my favorites, along with Dan Clowes' Eightball and Peter Bagge's Hate. This was the heyday of the Fantagraphics indie comic. Bob has a new graphic novel out now called Printopia and a new book that's sort of a career retrospective, up to this date anyway. He's still a young man. The new book is called That's Some Business You're In, and we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about his days writing for Cracked, then later writing for Mad, working with Harvey Kurtzman, all that and more. Bob Fingerman. Bert Kearns is here. Now, Bert has visited us before discussing his books, The Show Won't Go On, which is the history of actors who've died on stage, and his fascinating biography of Lawrence Tierney. But his new book holds a special fascination for me, and probably you, if you listen to this podcast. It's called Shemp, with an exclamation point. And it's about Shemp Howard, the great stooge. Now, people think Shemp replaced Curly. He didn't. Curly replaced Shemp. And then Shemp re-replaced Curly after that. But it's not just stooge lore, although there's a lot. It's also about showbiz in the 30s and 40s, the experience of American immigrants, how they helped define our culture, and so much more. It's a great read, as a foreword by your friend and mine, Drew Friedman. Shemp, with an exclamation point. Me? Oh, tons of stuff. On December 7th, you can see Hanging with Dr. Z live in Columbus, Ohio at GalaxyCon with guests Janet Varney, Stephen Kramer Glickman, and Weird Al Yankovic. On December 15th, it's Christmas with a Z, starring the Good Doctor at Dynasty Typewriter here in Los Angeles, with Bill Hader, Patton Oswalt, Rob Zabrecki, Janet Varney, Rusty Steele, Carmine St. Pierre, Claudine, and a host of other holiday surprises. This show sold out in a couple of days. I finally found a way to be popular. Just stop being me. But you can see the show live in the comfort of your own home as we are live streaming it. And I'll tell you how to get it in a minute. On January 10th and 11th, Dr. Z continues the tour, performing with Joel Hodgson from Mystery Science Theater and Wayne White from Pee-wee's Playhouse as a part of Hodgson and White's Cheesecapades at Joey's Song in Madison, Wisconsin. Please come if you can. For links and details for all of these things, just go to the live shows page at danagould.com or the link in my bio on Instagram, Dana Gould, or Dr. Z's Instagram, which is Hanging with Dr. Z. Doctor spelled out, D-O-C-T-O-R. Now, if you listen to this podcast, or if you've ever seen Hanging with Dr. Z, you are familiar with the work of and the name Andy Paley. Andy was a brilliant musician, a 5-star human being, and a really great friend. He was far too talented to be wasting his time on my little projects, but if you were his friend, he gave you his talent. It did not matter what you were doing. Just to give you a thumbnail sketch of Andy's career, he started in the late 60s in Boston, of course, with a band called the Sidewinders. The Sidewinders opened for Aerosmith when they were just getting started. He and his brother Jonathan formed a duo called the Paley Brothers, which, because they were both good-looking blonde guys, landed them in the pages of Tiger Beat. He was very close with Jonathan Richman of Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. He ended up in New York at Max's Kansas City. He played keyboards for Patti Smith on her European tour in 1976. He produced music for Deborah Harry, Madonna, NRBQ, Katie Lang, Little Richard. But the dream gig came in 1988 when Andy teamed up with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys to co-write and produce Brian's 1988 solo album, Brian Wilson. Brian and Andy remained lifelong friends. Brian called Andy, quote, the most frighteningly talented person that I've met and the greatest musical genius I've come across in many years, end quote. He would know. He wrote music for SpongeBob. He was the musical director for Tom Kenny and the High Seas, which features not only our own Tom Kenny, but our own Joe Napolitano and Jalinda Palmer as well. If you listen to the Halloween episode and you hear, tune in, it's a guy, that's Andy. He had a great attitude about life. He didn't let stuff get to him. He told me this story once. He found a shoebox full of cassette tapes in his house. And when he played them, he didn't know what they were. And he played them, and they were answering machine tapes from his old answering machine. And they were all just long messages from Brian Wilson. And there's one of them where Brian says to Andy, hey, Andy, come on over. We're going to meditate. We're going to put on the robes, get in the hot tub, double barrel meditation. And I told Andy, if I ever learned how to play music or have a band, it will be called double barrel meditation. But this is the reason I'm telling you this story. So he's playing me one message from Brian, and you hear a click, and he says, do you hear that? That's Eugene Landy, Brian's predatory, discredited therapist, listening in on the extension. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. You were there at the height of all the Eugene Landy craziness. And he said, oh yeah, I had to wear a pager. And I said, why'd you have to wear a pager? He goes, I don't know. Landy made me wear a pager. And I said, well, you didn't have to wear it. And he just shrugged and went, I don't care. And then I said, well, why did he make you wear a pager? And he just went, oh, control. It didn't bother him. He didn't care. Well, as you've probably surmised, we lost Andy on November 20th. It came about incredibly quickly, and we're all still kind of, most importantly, by far, our thoughts go out to his wife, Heather, and his sons, Jackson and Charlie. You'll always hear his name here and his music, and you'll feel his spirit, because to know Andy was to want to be as much like him as you possibly could. Andy Paley. Till we meet again.
Fix your eyes on twilight skies. That's the point of view. And if you'll just believe your eyes, you'll see your dreams come true. The comet's flight, the twinkling light, it's all a show for you. An angel heard your prayer tonight, and now your dreams come true. Falling, 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 falling star. Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour Podcast.
The Dana Gould Hour. Free. And worth it.
It's a crisp, windy, sun-dappled day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in the People's Republic of California, jewel in the crown of the former United States. And I am sitting here with an old friend and a good friend. Please welcome Bob Fingerman.
Yay!
Now, Bob, I, coming up when I did in the 90s and early aughts, it was the heyday of alternative comics. The sort of the Fantagraphics world that sort of evolved from Weirdo and Narcrum and all of those things. Harvey Kurtzman.
Yeah.
And there were the three big ones. My three favorites were Dan Clowes' Eightball,
Of course.
Peter Bagge's Hate, and Bob Fingerman's Minimum Wage. All of them which sort of were a great snapshot of, I would say, not to sound like arty-farty, but like of where our generation was at that time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. And you have a new book called Printopia that is a really equally as observant look at where we are now.
Well, thank you.
And you also have another book that I really wanted to start talking about called That's Some Business You're In, which is, it's sort of the Bob Fingerman primer. Or primer or primer.
You know, Mad Magazine always had those primers or primers.
Yeah.
I never quite knew how to.
Yeah.
I never landed on the pronunciation.
Right. And you were, you worked for Mad, you worked for Cracks, but let's start at the beginning and move forward, because you were started cartooning like 4.
Yeah, I mean, I was starting cartooning before I knew it was cartooning. It's just, it's the simple lines on paper that a kid makes, and then one day he realizes, oh, I'm a cartoonist.
But you either have an ability or you don't. Like, you didn't come from a particularly artistic background. Is it?
Well, I mean, yes and no. My mom, I come from a suppressed artistic background.
Right.
Suppressed, repressed, oppressed. Both of my parents pretty much had different kinds of artistic inclinations. My mom wanted to be an artist.
Right.
But she did not have the luxury to pursue such frippery. My dad wanted to be a writer of fiction. Mm-hmm. And he even sold a novel to a then, burgeoning major imprint, but he never delivered the the finished manuscript. So he managed to.
That's a toughie.
Yeah, and
this is East Coast. This is
very New York.
Right.
These are sad New York people.
Right. And you what borough did you?
I grew up. Oh God, I don't even want to say it anymore.
Queens.
Queens used to just be known for being dull.
Well, Queens was known for being dull, and then it was known for Archie Bunker.
Yes.
Yeah, and now it's known for other people.
Other reasons.
Adolf Bunker.
Yes, there. Exactly. May he end up in the bunker someday. Yes, please.
You grew up in Queens, and so did they encourage you? They encouraged you, obviously. If you have, I would think that somebody who tried to, let's be blunt, if you don't deliver your manuscript, I'm going to put that in fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you never got the opportunity to try it because you're raising a family, that's a different thing. If I put your mom and your dad in different categories there.
Yeah. And I can't, and my dad would not blame me. He had some issues with me, but he would not blame me. He would not blame me for not finishing his manuscript, because that's before I was even conceived.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, I was encouraged, particularly by my mom. She was kind of the ideal mother of a creative child, in that while she wanted me to do well in school and get good grades, she did not say, well, don't do your drawings and all that. Focus on something important. She knew the art was important.
Oh, that's great that she could see that.
Yeah.
And nurture that.
Yeah. So that,
and did your dad project his issues onto you? Like, that's a waste of time.
He didn't really. The thing is, my dad passively is more responsible for me being a cartoonist than my mom, because My mom didn't have any cartoon books in her library. Both of them were book people. My parents divorced when I was an infant, so I should make that clear.
You had one job, keeping your parents together.
Well, you know, right. Let's call it the initial interview. I blew it. Yeah, no, I.
So you have no memory of your parents as a couple?
No, and my mom. I mean,
both remarried.
No, neither remarried.
Neither remarried.
Yeah. Not only did I ruin marriage for them, but they ruined marriage for each other.
Wow, so. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's my mom never even dated again. She was just done. She was like, men suck. I'm done. She wasn't a man hater, but she was just like, it's enough. I'm just going to be a mom. So, yeah, pretty interesting. It was a different time also because being a divorced woman.
Is the 70s, right?
Well, you and I am one day younger than you.
Oh, okay. So it's late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. So like to be a divorced woman in 1964 meant you were kind of slatternly.
Yeah. You were Scarlet Letter.
Yeah. So like other moms in the neighborhood didn't even really want to hang out with her because she was going to steal their man. And
that's so strange. But it's interesting you say that because, you know, with all of the current talk about culture and advancements and regressions, you know, we've had so much fucked up shit so recently. You know, it's like people, you have to remember, like 1964 was 60 years ago.
Yeah.
And the president of the United States had to mortgage every ounce of power he had to pass the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah. And
he couldn't even put the Voting Rights Act into it because that would have killed it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like these things are just not 100 years ago.
Nope.
You know, it's important to remember the danger. I know we talked about this off the air and we don't want to go into it.
I have a friend who, even prior to all this, is a devourer of American history. And he will frequently say, so did you know in 1890, whatever, he'll tell me stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, that could have been yesterday's headlines.
Absolutely.
So
Grover Cleveland, I believe, skipped a term and came back.
Yeah. So it's like everything old is new again, et cetera.
That's so true. Yeah.
I think you and I both joked about how we're both Kennedy grief babies because we're both pretty much 9 months
after the assassination. Yeah. So you're the 25th?
Yeah.
You, Elvis Costello, Tim Burton, and my former mother-in-law.
Yeah, but they couldn't blame
the
Kennedy.
Big Four.
Yeah, we both can blame Kennedy for his Dallas incident.
Still investigating. Might have been a sneeze he held in.
Could be. People were more polite.
And you have a sibling?
I do not.
You do not have a sibling.
I'm it. Right now, you were looking at the Fingerman family. I'm all that's left. So
your mom...
It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, both people...
Everybody's gone.
Right.
Everybody.
How does it... Okay. So how does that... Who lived longer?
Well, my dad not only lived long. Yeah, my mom passed, as they say euphemistically, in 2016. She was 83, but my dad hung in until he was 93 2 years later.
Okay, yeah, my dad's just turned 94.
Yeah.
And did they have a relationship after the divorce?
Only really.
Outside of dropping you off.
Yeah, really. No, only really predicated on like him picking me up and dropping me off on weekends. And if I got crazy remarks in my report card, he might have to show up to a parent-teacher thing. Didn't happen very often, but he at least had to show some interest.
Did you ever find out why they divorced?
Oh, yeah. My mom told me flat out. She said she did not, and this is talk about a great mother. She did not want me to grow up in a toxic environment with two people brooding at each other in different corners.
Yeah. They did do you a favor, although you might not know it. Sometimes you have to break the leg to reset it properly. It doesn't mean breaking the leg is fun.
Yeah, she said it wouldn't have been drama. They were not drama people. It wouldn't have been yelling and all that. It just would have been sullenness.
Yeah.
And silent recriminations.
Yeah, I get it.
So she was just like, I just want my kid to grow up in a nurturing environment. So,
right.
So, yeah.
And so they didn't really chat like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I mean, they did when he would stay for dinners.
Okay.
On she would make a dinner I would go with him on Fridays and stay the night. And then he'd bring me back Saturday evening, have dinner, and then attempt to sneak out before I, when I was supposedly going to sleep. And then I would throw a huge separation anxiety.
Oh, because he was leaving again,
right? He was leaving. So it was the weekly
wow.
weekly meltdown.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh.
There you go.
Yeah, and then you start. I want to move on, but I have another question. Did you ever read your dad's novel or know what it was about?
It was literally locked away for my whole life, and when he died, I finally.
Please let it be like it's just like robots fucking, or just some like crazy.
Cyber twat! What the hell? I did find the manuscript. But I still haven't read it. It's 160 pages.
How do you not read that?
Because I'm still like in a weird place about it. But I will. I know it's a roman à clef about his life at sea. He was a merchant seaman.
Okay.
Teehee.
Right.
So yeah, my dad is the classic greatest generation guy who led a storied life until I showed up and ruined everything.
Right.
But,
and he did. Yeah, he did. You were saying that he did. He was a sailor.
Yeah, he was.
But then he couldn't do that when you were born.
Correct.
He had to get landlocked. Yeah. Did he ever think about? Do you think he would have been happier and your parents would have been happier if he just stayed at sea? He was like, "I'll be back in 4 months. I'm going to. I'm taking a boat full of pencils to England."
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Who knows? I honestly don't know how to answer that, and it's the first time that question has been posed to my little brain.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, he was definitely away probably 8 months of the year, so yeah, who knows?
Yeah, they could have just stayed together and
maybe
mucked it out.
Maybe. Yeah, but those 4 months.
Aunts, uncles?
All gone. Everybody's gone. But, my mother's sister was very kind of artsy too, so she also encouraged me. And her husband, they had a weird relationship in that he had a mistress on the side and she knew about it. But it was like, that's fine. You paw her, you come home to me. And
wow, that's a very European.
Yeah, well, they were in a lot of ways. I mean, they were kind of obsessed with France and Japan. He was fluent in Japanese, and
right.
He was a flute guy. When when you're a kid, you think your uncle owns a music shop. You want it to be electric guitars.
Yeah,
you don't want it to be the flute.
Yeah, unless you're a Jethro Tull fan, then you can.
But he might have had Ian Anderson as a client. He had everybody, James Galway, pretty much Jean-Pierre Rampal, like all. I know flute people,
flutes, yeah,
because of my uncle. But
and they're all gone too.
Yeah, everybody.
Do you find that? I'm sorry to dwell on this because do you find that oddly freeing?
In a way, yes. In a way, yes. Yeah, not to get too heavy.
No, because I wanted to relate it to how I felt after my mom passed.
But yeah, it is relevant. And, maybe if anybody listening can take something away from this that's helpful, fine. I was very close with my mom. Very bonded, and
sure,
in a way more important than loving her, I liked her. A lot of people say, I love my mom.
I get it.
I liked my mom. We spoke every day. She was hip on current events, and she watched shows that I liked and read, and, we had a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm. What year was your mom born?
1933.
Same year as my mom.
There you go.
God, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
This is now it's going to get really, if this gets any more numerologically creepy, my wife is going to come running out of the back and do your chart.
That's all right. We can get wooey. It's okay.
What was her birthday?
August.
Okay, no.
And after both my parents were gone, after the requisite kind of, like I say, processing, grieving part, yeah, it felt like a lot lifted.
Yeah.
Because both my parents also were very negative people.
Uh-huh.
And that negativity kind of held me.
Yeah, you got to get away from it.
For my whole life, I was a much kind of darker person.
I had a very good friend who was so negative. Happened to be brilliant. So he was hilariously negative, but it was unrelenting. And when I got married and had kids and became a happy person, it became harder and harder to be around. People think I'm like a lot of people that know who I am to begin with think I'm like a dark, brooding, negative person because my comedy is a little darker. But it's just, I used to be. I am not any longer. But I still find that stuff really funny.
Right. Same here.
You know, it's just like Dr. Strangelove is my favorite comedy. It's a dark comedy, but it's like I find that funny. Yeah. That's the stuff that I find funny. I also love Pee-wee's Big Adventure. You know, it's like I can like two things.
Yes.
But that sort of unrelenting negativity about the world, I just like, I can't. I have kids. I can't go here. I can't afford this anymore.
Right.
Emotionally.
Well, you know, I don't know how healthy it is when you think of yourself sort of in third person, but I do look at the phases of my life as New York Bob and then California Bob.
Right.
And it really was a big, because that whole decision to just end my life in New York and reboot here was a pretty big deal. And part of that was like, I just want to be happier. I just want to be more cheerful. I want to go.
The magazines that you started to work on that people would be the most familiar with was Cracked before Mad or Mad before Cracked?
Oh no, Cracked was way before. Cracked was literally my first regular gig when I was 21 years old.
Yeah.
So.
And that's early. I know exactly how you were 85, kind of, because I remember when I was 21.
Yeah. We both can do much easier math because of this.
Yeah. So it's the Ignatius P. Smythe.
Sylvester.
Sylvester P. Smythe.
Sorry to.
No, that's okay.
But be proud you didn't know it exactly, because you really shouldn't be able to just pull that one right out of the ether.
But no, Ignatius P. Riley is from Confederacy of Dunces. Yeah. That's what I was thinking about this morning. Why was I thinking about that book this morning?
I can't imagine.
Sylvester C. But that must have been an incredible coup for you to like, I'm a writer. Like the first time you open up Cracked and see one of your pieces. Yeah. That must have been a huge thrill.
It's funny because it wasn't because I was very negative in my own way. It was like, well, it's not Mad. You know, it's like, this is fine.
And that was in the 80s when Mad was at its peak. The Mad had its own building in New York, the Mad building. Tina Brown was editing.
That's right. Exactly.
Tina Brown really turned around Mad.
we all kind of forget that part, but you know, if you know, you know.
It's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, but still, you're getting checks. Did you submit? Did you ever like go in?
Always.
Oh, you did go
in. These are the old days when you would always hand deliver your stuff, you know, and their office was, the first office they had was a block north of the Empire State Building. And it was filthy. It was just, I'm sure, because they were sharing space with in fact, I think it was the same publisher, did really low rent pornos as well. They weren't like glossy. There was pornos. These were little digests printed on newsprint. So everything smelled like a basement.
Right.
It was, there was something.
Was it photos or just like bad porn writing?
I think it was both, but you know, if you've ever seen porno photos printed on newsprint, it's like, it's like, you know, looking at a daguerreotype or something.
I remember it's a digression, but it happened. This is like probably 80, this was early 90s, probably, I'm going to say 90 or 91. I'm in New York. I'm staying at the Gramercy Park.
Sure.
And it's a nice hotel, Gramercy Park. That's an upscale hotel.
Yeah, it's a nice neighborhood.
Nice neighborhood. And my bed feels weird.
Oh, no.
I look under the mattress, and there is you're expecting a dead hooker in the box spring.
Uh-huh.
A wealth of low market porn.
Wow.
Like truck stop fare.
Sure.
Funny Uncle, a lot of stuff. Low rent magazines, shaved snake owner and novel. Like, I don't know what happened. I was just like, somebody had a problem and they went to the Gramercy Park to just like indulge and then put it under the bed and left. So it's like 1 a.m. And I pull the stuff out. My first idea is, what the fuck is wrong with this bed? So I get everything out of it, and it's a stack of
the princess in the porn.
Yeah, exactly the princess in the porn. How did I never? So I'm like, I'm not throwing this away in my room. I do not want the maid to.
I did not bring this here.
Yeah. So I'll just leave it. I'll put it in the garbage by the elevator.
Sure.
So I go down to the elevator and I can't fit it I've got to like a mailbox. I've got to slide it in one by one and the elevator doors open. And I just turned my back and like hunch. And I just literally played possum. Like, I'm not here. And I'm sure they were looking at me and I just let them go. And then I went back to mailing my porn to the garbage. It was so awful.
Collector's items, every single one of them.
Oh, I'm sure I threw away a fortune that night.
Oh, some of the ones that I do remember, three of the titles that that shared the office with Cracked. One was Human Digest.
That's a great title, though. It sounds like something Ed Wood would have written for.
Yeah, exactly. He might have.
Yeah.
The other was Intimate Letters, and they might have done a glossy called Pub. They couldn't afford the E, just Pub.
Yeah, that was it was the 80s when you could. That was still a thing. I love that world. I have no firsthand experience with it, but I just read the James Warren's book. Which is all about that
That's
world.
A good book.
Yeah, it's such a great. Again, our good friends at Fantagraphics have bequeathed us with that book. Yeah, it's called Empire of Monsters. If anybody wants to read it, I think I talked about it on this podcast.
Yeah, highly recommended.
And it really because James Warren was Don Draper. He was like this handsome dude in New York in the 60s. Fucked everything he could.
Sure did.
And
had his own helicopter.
Yeah, and printed monster magazines.
Yeah.
It was big business.
And launched the career of a lot of comics guys whose work I love.
Yeah. So how did you make true. How did you make the jump to Mad? Is that and when did you come into dealing with Harvey Kurtzman? Because people should I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who know who Harvey Kurtzman is, but for people who don't, who is Harvey Kurtzman and what is he to people like you, cartoonists?
Well, Harvey Kurtzman, really, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much the godfather of modern comedy, because I haven't actually put it on paper, but if you do a flow chart, all modern comedy leads back to Kurtzman because Kurtzman created Mad.
Right.
And without Mad, you don't have Saturday Night Live. You don't have National Lampoon.
Right.
You don't even have Monty Python because Kurtzman was kind of responsible for Terry Gilliam meeting John Cleese.
Right. Yes.
So there's all this stuff. There's all these things that connect back to Kurtzman. Kurtzman was a singular person in that he had great comedic vision and terrible business sense. He's a guy who should have had the James Warren lifestyle instead of ending up doing
by the way,
rent.
I can relate.
Oh, yeah. Business savvy and creative savvy very seldom cozy up in the same brain.
Never. It's always, I was talking about this with somebody. It's like in every group of people, there's the people that are really good at what they're doing, and then there's the person that wants to be in charge. And usually that's the person that's not that good at what they're doing. But everyone goes, yeah, go, because I don't want to be bothered with it.
Yeah, and Kurtzman, by necessity was an editor, because he was really should have just been doing the creative stuff instead of the org stuff. And his career was really the worst decisions. I'm sure if there are comments, some people might take umbrage. Worst decision he ever made really was leaving Mad.
Right.
He and Bill Gaines, the publisher, they kind of bumped up against each other, but Gaines is actually a pretty heroic figure. He testified at the House Un-American Activities stuff, and he was the guy who stood alone when all the heat was coming down on how comic books were creating juvenile delinquents and all that.
He stood alone, and he found a workaround.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
Which was, just to people listening, in the 50s, there was a giant moral panic about comic, EC comics and monster comics leading children into degeneracy. And he changed the way Mad was literally physically published so that it qualified as a magazine and fell under a different set of restrictions. It's quite brilliant.
Exactly. So yeah, Gaines is somebody I wish somebody would do a biopic. Hey, Scott and Larry, do a biopic, because he was an interesting guy, just all around interesting guy.
Take a look at him.
Get Jonah Hill, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, but Kurtzman, when I knew him, was fortunate enough to know him. He was teaching at the School of Visual Arts, SVA, in New York. And that's part and parcel of making bad life choices, because it's like, well, I could use a gig that pays health insurance and all that. I've got a family. Yeah. I'm sure there are other things he would have rather been doing than going to Manhattan a few days a week to deal with a bunch of mostly rude idiots.
And that's where you...
That's where I chose going to SVA because Kurtzman was faculty there. And
could you have gone to RISD if you wanted?
Probably not, because it would have involved living out of state and all that kind of stuff.
And where did Kurtzman live?
Kurtzman lived basically Westchester. Okay. Not really Westchester.
He lived out of the city.
Hastings-on-Hudson, I think, was where he was. It was a nice house, I was there a few times. But Kurtzman launched my career. The weird thing about Kurtzman is he was one of the most inventive guys for sequential storytelling, comics. He didn't teach that. See, I didn't even read the brief on his class. I just, Kurtzman teaches there. I want that.
Right.
And then when I showed up, and he was teaching gag cartoons, like single panel, like, Charles Addams or...
Oh, funny.
And I thought, what? Wait, I don't even think he ever did one in his career. So it was very, very weird that he was teaching gag panels. So I kind of checked out. That was one of those like, oof, he's one of my heroes, but this class is kind of a bummer. But I like a blonde at Schwab's got discovered by him.
You are the Lana Turner of alt comics.
Well, I was when I was 19. I was a looker. But Kurtzman was going through. I went to use the bathroom, and he was going through my personal sketchbook, which I left on my table, and he literally pulled me out of the class and closed the door. And he said, Fingerman, I didn't know you could draw.
Oh, wow. That must have been a thrill.
And I felt both bad and good, because it's like, well, he's acknowledging I can draw, but it's like I didn't realize the work I was doing for his class was that bad. I knew it wasn't my A-list stuff. But at any rate, the point being, it went from me being a really lackluster student, just one of the other ones, to him hiring me on the spot. He said, how would you like to work for me?
Wow.
And I
that's
said,
that's like a scene out of a movie. That must have been quite a day.
Yeah, because I said, well, yeah, doing what? And he was putting together.
Do you know how to operate a riding lawnmower? Hey, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Exactly. That's not what does the phrase pool boy mean anything to you? And how do you look in shorts?
Yeah.
My wife is lonely. So yeah, he was putting together a humor anthology for youngs, and he wanted to have actually some young contributor. Right. So I was their teen hire for this humor anthology.
Hilarious.
So he started my career. That was my first professional gig at 19, working for Kurtzman. So that was a pretty good start.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And then you
but that led right to Cracked.
Right.
Because that really was man. I wasn't good enough for Mad. Truth is, I mean, this sounds like you're like I'm knocking myself, which I am, but it's realistic, and I'm knocking Cracked, which I definitely am. Cracked was fine, but it was no Mad.
Right.
Not no Mad.
Right.
But
you ended up.
But I ended up there, nearly 30 years later.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I got there eventually.
Yeah.
It was one of those things, because actually for a while there, it might never have happened, because the editor of Cracked, when I was working for them, he had a very antagonistic side where he really was going after Mad. And so if you worked for Cracked, you were on a do not hire list,
right?
Because of guilt by association. And it took a long time for that kind of stink to get off you.
Right.
I think the first person from Cracked, from my group that got to work for Mad was a guy named Bill Ray, who's really well known in animation. He was one of the Ren and Stimpy guys, but he ended up working for Cracked. And that's when I thought, oh, maybe it could happen for me someday.
Right.
And eventually did. So.
It's interesting you're talking about Charles Addams one-panel cartoons, because that's a great example of something that I really appreciate them, but I don't find them funny. They're clever.
Addams are just gag panels in general.
Addams.
Oh, yeah. No, Addams is not going to make you laugh out loud.
Yeah.
And he didn't write his own gags
clever.
anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's clever, yeah. No, but there are these guys. Did you ever know of do you remember a comic called Beautiful Stories for Ugly Children?
Sure.
It was Piranha Press.
Yeah.
Those guys, I'm mispronouncing their names. Dave Luop and Dan Sweetman.
Yeah.
They had some one panels, dark as hell, but so funny. I have one, you can see it. Somebody put it on a ceramic tile for me.
Oh.
It's a picture of a guy, and he's tied rats to helium balloons, and he's just watching them go off into the sky. And it said, there was no method to Dave's madness, just an insatiable urge to make a difference. It's like, nope, that's funny. I laughed out loud at that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, some of my favorite cartoonists were single panel guys, but I just didn't want to be one.
Right.
Sam Gross, nobody funnier than Sam Gross.
Yeah.
The late Charles Rodriguez, who was one of the foulest,
Sure.
darkest
Yeah.
humorists of all time, but it was just, that's not the way my brain ever worked, was that kind of.
It is so funny, because being a comedian, all these people that are so funny and dark. It's like, yeah, no, you're funny. You're dark. At your darkest and funniest, you're 1/10 as dark as Ivan Brunetti.
Well, yeah. Ivan in his day, yeah, he just.
Yeah,
I have a couple of originals that he gave me years ago, and I've never put them up on the wall, because it's like,
no,
I'd need to put a little black curtain in front of them. Are we having company? Oh, I'd better close. One of the ones he gave me was a strip called Queefy, and I thought, well, okay, I can't really display that.
I can't display this, yeah. And I always thought that was funny. I remember, like, being, again, like, I work in stand-up comedy, and then I also write. Like, I've never met a stand-up comedian that's as funny sitting around in a room as George Meyer. It's like, it's just a different skill set. But it's like, no, this guy's so brutally funny.
Yeah.
And they just,
Yeah, it's great to be around people like that, especially because when they're not on, they're just good.
Yeah. Oh, well put. How did minimum wage come about? It's sort of like, that's what you're known for more than anything else.
Minimum wage came out of creative frustration because I had been, the thing is, some people come right out of the gate. They've got their voice, they've got their look. And I've always been like, I'm going to find it. And I think everything I did was definitely like, you'd look at it and say, oh yeah, Bob Fingerman did that.
Right.
But it morphs. It changes from story to story, job to job, and often over the course of the same thing. Because it's always just sort of like, oh, if I discover something better midway through a gig, I'm going to do that. And so the first half won't look as good as the second half.
Right.
Maybe I'll go back and retouch. But minimum wage came from a few things. I had just done my first graphic novel, a thing called White Like She. And while I was very proud of it, it was an art style I had never drawn in before and I never ever would return to. And it was really rigid. And I basically found a way to suck all the joy out of doing comics in one job. I don't think it looks, like some people love the way it looks. I look at it and I can just see all the things that I wish I had done differently.
I think I understand that. John Hodgman said something to me once. We were talking about a book, and I was thinking of writing this book, and then he said, don't overthink it. It's just a book. Because to me, it was like, this has to be, flawless labor, and this is my book. That's just a book.
Yeah. Nicholas Sparks is not slaving over great prose.
Right.
He's just sitting on his antebellum, porch saying, damn.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a certain, I won an award once, and scare quotes around the word award, at a kind of punk downtown group art show at a bar in Soho, and they would make up awards to go with the art, and I won an award for most preciously overworked. And even though it was funny, it was like, like the best zingers, that one landed hard, because I thought, it takes people to know, who know what they're identifying in somebody else's work. And it really kind of stuck with me. It's like, I got to loosen up. And minimum wage was
but
partly...
I'll give you another example, not to interrupt, but like
Sure.
somebody whose work I just am in awe of, Drew Friedman.
Oh, sure.
Just like, it's head and shoulders above anything I've seen. There's just like his pointillism and the any relation to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. So influential on not even my comedy, my personality.
Sure.
Like I got that I saw that in like 86. And I was like, oh, I'm this.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that thinks this is funny.
Yeah.
And I was like, you can make jokes about old Bela Lugosi?
Sure.
Like stuff that only I thought was funny. Like it was like, as Bobcat calls it, finding the star-bellied sneeches. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You also think this is, but that work, I mean, I think he has, the way he does it is, I don't think somehow it's not as laborious as it used to be.
No, well, I mean, he used to with the tiniest crow quill pen you say pointillism. It was all just doing.
It's breathtaking.
And now watercolor.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I would see strips like The Incredible Shrinking Joe Franklin.
Yeah.
and that's when you say, okay, this is a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
This is,
yeah.
You find
as
your
a young
people.
As a young child, Joe's father would use his head to sweep up entrails. Like I know that book. I have that book completely memorized.
Yeah. That is definitely one of those touchstone books where you just, and I'm glad.
But the point I was making is like that was also so labor intensive.
Yeah. No, that was OCD as an art form.
So after that comes you want to clearly want to break away from that after White Like She and do something that doesn't break your hand.
And I also wanted to do something, I'd been accused by my first wife always taking the safe road with my art. She was like, you don't put any of yourself in it. It's all so like superficial and blah, 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 sci-fi, horror, who cares? So I thought...
This was your first wife.
Yes. So I thought, let me do something really personal, but still fictionalized. I still wanted to have that little... I didn't want to go full R. Crumb.
You don't want to do a roman à clé about your time at sea.
Exactly. Yeah. There's my dad's genes in me. It's like I can, it's truthiness. It's not true. It's truthiness.
Yeah.
So
that's the old expression, print the truthiness.
Yeah. There you go. Well, that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, so that was minimum wage where, I mean.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, describe minimum wage.
Oh, it was about it was a romance comic where it's the warts and all version.
Yeah, but it's about a bunch of alternative culture jerks in New York in the 90s.
Very much, yeah. It's
and I say that as somebody that was one of them.
Oh, yeah. I didn't take that as a disparagement at all.
Yeah.
No, basically... somebody once called it like low rent Friends, and it's not really like Friends.
It's the anti-Friends.
And then somebody else called it like Seinfeld's. Like, no, it's not like Seinfeld. I think it's like itself. I do think it's like itself. This is one of these things for better, for good or for ill. I do have my own voice. But yeah, it was just about a group of friends, all pretty much trying, minimum wage. My joke was it was an aspirational title, but it's not really a joke because like doing comics, especially for like independent comics, when you add up the hours to the whatever your advance was, it's like, oh yeah, it's not even minimum wage.
Right.
But you love, you do it because you love it.
But you really do capture not even a time, but an era of everyone's life.
Yeah.
Everyone has that period of time.
Yeah. Well, the irony is when I started it, I started it as a 30th birthday present to myself. I was like, okay, I'm just going to turn 30. I really want to love doing comics again because that last thing I didn't love doing. But I thought, let me look back to when I was a young 21-year-old.
Yeah.
And even there, it was like a little bit of hubris to think that was looking back. Because I did come back. I did minimum wage from 94 to 99. And then I put it on. I didn't even think I'd come back to it. But I came back to doing it new in 2014. So at that point now, I am considerably older. Than when I was, and I only wanted to advance the story a little bit. I didn't want to say I'm going to do the main character Rob, my stand-in. Now he'll be young middle age. No, he's. I pick up only a couple of years after, where he's 25 and going through a divorce, which is what I did. I was 25 and was going through a divorce, which is a weird thing to be going through when you're basically still a child.
Still a child, yeah.
So there was a lot.
And how old were you when you first got married?
23.
Yeah, that's young to get married.
Yeah, exactly. As the saying goes, mistakes were made.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like the minute you say "I do," you start the countdown clock.
Yeah, there. Say what you will about Michael Crichton, but he had a line in Andromeda Strain, I think the book, where it was describing a guy walking down the aisle wondering how much his alimony would be.
Yeah, I don't know when I'll ever get to do this, but I have a line that I want to put in something where it's like, he stood at the back of the church and thought the only way out is through.
Yeah, it's true though. You gotta live your life. That's the thing. It's like, sometimes you read these autobiographical comics, and when they're just
that doesn't refer to any marriage that I'm in or was in before.
The caveats and legal
legal
disclaimers. That's another good name for a podcast.
Yeah, legal disclaimers.
But yeah, so minimum wage was kind of a way of doing that, doing a little bit of purging, doing a little bit of fessing up. And also having a little
But I tell you, the minute I said that, my wife shows up. Like the minute I made that wisecrack. Yes, I'm totally serious. Well, this is my friend Bob.
I remember.
Yeah. Bob was saying that Michael Crichton wrote a line in a novel about a man walking down the aisle wondering how much his alimony would cost. And I said I wanted to have a line, but I don't know where to put it, about he stood in the back of the church thinking the only way out is through. But it doesn't refer to any relationship I'm in or have ever been in the past. And then the minute I got him, I hear like...
Which I think I read every Michael Crichton novel as a kid.
Yeah, it's an Andromeda strain.
That was literally one of my favorites. Your blood thickens immediately. Oh my god, that was so good.
See? She can drop quote Michael Crichton. I ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, no, that is the mark of. Well, that's probably, I think that's the only book of his I read, though. I will
really?
Say. Yeah.
You read Jurassic Park.
I didn't.
Isn't Jurassic Park just?
Oh, I did read Eaters of the Dead. I forgot about that.
Isn't
one.
Jurassic
No.
Park just Westworld with with dinosaurs instead of cowboys?
Pretty much.
It's pretty much a remake of his own book.
Immediately went, no. I did not read the manga.
Nope. Nope. And I've only watched the Bruce Campbell part of the movie.
Yeah, it's the only part worth watching. Getting married at 23. I didn't get married. My first marriage, I was 36.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you know who you are.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. Well, you know who you are at the time. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because there's I shudder to, I've said this before, like I meet people that I knew before I was 30 and I just blanket apologize. Like, I'm sorry. I was such a mess.
Yeah.
Train wreck.
Yeah.
Emotional, personality, all of it. Just nope, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, well, if you're lucky, you kind of get that kind of self-realization.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
That's called growing as a human being.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, but like even returning to... When I returned to Rob and his chums...
Right.
I had a much keener awareness of the character Rob where he was at that point in my life,
right,
as a 25-year-old, and it shifts that thing where he's still the protagonist, but he's not necessarily always the hero of it. His own
he's not
story.
the hero, and life is happening to him a lot more.
Well, it's funny too, also, because there's a writer friend of mine who, when I first moved here in 2017, he's a TV writer, and I was hoping he and I might work on something together, and so I gave him a bunch of my stuff.
Right.
And he read it, and he said, "You write very passive protagonists." He said, "In your novels, it's like you write books where things happen to your character.
Right.
Your character doesn't make things happen." And then he was kind of like, "Is that you? It's like, is that how you live your life?" And I thought, well, I'm probably somewhere in the middle, because I do make things happen, or I wouldn't have a career.
Yeah.
But I can definitely relate to the passive protagonist more than that alpha male who's, going to do his Joseph Campbell. I'm going to...
No, but I also think that's like a life thing. Like for the average person, you start off, wanting to tame the world, and then you get, and then your pride comes from surviving it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was really full of myself when I was 19, and I'm working for Kurtzman, and then I got a book deal with a French publisher, and I was very enamored of French comics and all that because of Heavy Metal magazine,
right?
And
Yeah,
all that.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I've got a book deal with a French publisher. I'm working for Kurtzman. I'll drop out SVA. The world's my oyster.
Right.
And then within a year or two of that, you're like, well, I'm a regular in Cracked, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, yeah.
It's not exactly the world beater that I thought I was going to be, but at least I'm paying my rent.
Yeah, and that's no small thing. Your new book, you have a graphic novel called Printopia.
Yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if it's, I won't say return to form.
It's a bit of a return to form. It's a bit of a, what I like about it is it's a, to use the Scorsese analogy, it's like, it's the casino to the Goodfellas of like, yeah, these are characters. It's a similar worldview. It's a similar situation, but different location, different people. But your voice still comes through.
Well, yeah, I think that is accurate. I mean, the milieu is different. It's, it's basically episodic vignettes about creative oddballs with a framing device of a young lady who works at a print shop in Manhattan on the Upper West Side near Columbia University.
Right.
And, she's a frustrated cartoonist who's wrestling with imposter syndrome. So she basically is kind of looking at all these people who come into the shop, askance at them, but she's also kind of jealous of them because they do have that weird confidence that odd people sometimes have.
I understand
where they fully believe in their madness.
And you need that so desperately. And then it is one of those things, as you know, if you don't have it, you have to learn to fake it.
Yeah. Yeah. And she hasn't learned to fake it yet.
Yeah.
She's still kind of finding her way. I will tell you, just as a sidebar, I had an editor attached to this project, and it ended up moving to a different publisher. But the editor who was so excited about this book, the one who bought it, is a Gen Z young lady. And that validated this book so much for me. Because, the thing is, when you're a man of a certain age, and
whatever you do, you mean.
And your two protagonists, the two main characters are, two 23-year-old roommates who happen to be young women. Because of the time we're living in, it's like, am I allowed to do that?
Right.
And she thought it was great. She was just like, yeah, the voice is perfect. And I think it's because I wrote them as human beings and not as women. It's just like, these are people. And I think that helped. Is there a
reason that you chose this particular character as your lead?
Well, it's funny. The character's Darla Vogel, and she's kind of been popping up in my work for years in various forms.
It's like you look at her and I go, yeah, I know her.
Yeah, she's been in already 2 other books.
Yeah.
And she also kind of morphs and evolves. I did a book, a very strange book called Connective Tissue about 15 years ago, and she was the lead in that.
Right.
But she looked very different. And in that, she worked at a video store because that was a thing.
Same name, same character.
Name, same character, same 2 roommates. But I always wanted to come up with the right vehicle for her. And she's sort of extrapolated a little bit on somebody I know in real life.
Yeah.
But it's
interesting because you're a dude, but you're right very astutely from a woman. You write good women characters. Clowes also writes good women characters.
Yeah, again, you can only say I hope so. I hope I do.
Right.
But
it's possible.
Yeah, it's funny too because there's a bad book podcast that I listen to, and sometimes
bad book bot
podcast.
What's a book bot?
Oh,
B-O-T or B-O-U-G-H-T?
I believe I just misspoke. Actually, I think I was just stepping over my words. Bad book podcast.
Oh, I thought you said bad book bot, and I was like, "Is a book bot a thing I don't know about? What's a book bot? I need to know."
You've said it out loud 3 times, so it exists now for sure. The new Amazon book bot will.
I'm sure it's coming.
Well, that's probably what they're going to call the AI written books. This is by a book bot. This is a whole. Yeah, we don't have to.
Yeah, yeah.
But
great. I'll let my phone read it.
Sure. Yeah. What?
Can we just remove humans from the equation completely?
AI can write it and illustrate it, and then we'll get the book bot to read it.
Yeah.
And I'll sit over there in the corner and silently weep. And
but I mean, that is the thing that is like, and you see people doing it. If you remove humans from the equation, that's automatically bad.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it?
Yeah, it's it's puzzling to me. I mean, full disclosure, when Midjourney was still in beta, a friend of mine was posting some really weird stuff, and I thought, ooh, that's weird and interesting. What is it? And he ended up getting me in to be able to be playing with Midjourney.
I have no idea what
Midjourney is one of the AI art programs. And I was fascinated by it, absolutely fascinated. The whole thing of like you type in a prompt. And of course, I'm typing in the weirdest things I can think of just to see what is this going to make. And they were so bizarre and so interesting. And the truth is, when it was in beta, it was much more interesting because it was really flailing.
Right.
And coming up with just the weirdest shit no human would ever do. And now it looks like a human did it, and it's boring and just kind of upsetting now.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh yeah, now I can see it, how it is basically replacing hiring illustrators or this and that. Because it's, oh yeah, okay, so everyone points out the hands are weird, but the hands are getting better. Right. Once the hands are good, bye-bye freelance illustrators.
Right, but it's like, what? And then what's the good of that? What's the good in that?
Yeah, other than saving some money from hiring a human.
Right.
Really nothing.
But anybody who looks around the corner is like, you're saving money by not paying a person to do this.
Yeah.
But that person now doesn't have, the person you would pay now doesn't have money. And those are the people that buy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
if nobody's making any money, nobody's going to buy anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm more puzzled by. Who is their audience for this?
Yeah.
Because after you get over that initial being kind of dazzled that technology made it, oh, that's impressive. But after that, you're like,
yeah,
it's pretty empty.
It's pretty empty. And you can feel that, and hopefully that will.
Yeah, I think
it's like bad CG.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a fad or not. It's too soon to say, but it's a strange, so many weird things, and technology, people get very, it's dangling keys in front of a baby.
Yeah.
Right now, everyone's cooing happily looking at all this shit. But when when they're talking about, we're going to make our first AI movie.
Yeah, you have like that movie Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, which everybody thought movies will never need sets anymore. This is all green screen. It's like, yeah, it looks like garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, it evolves and it changes, but I can tell when a person's involved.
Yeah.
It's like, I was like, yeah, there's a tactile sense, but it's also, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the motto of science,
Yeah.
And once you tried, move on sometimes. It's like, okay, we did that. That was interesting.
Yeah.
I think people are going to get bored of it. I mean, there's going to be some people. If you're on social media, it's interesting because now literally every second or third ad, it's a very obvious AI fake photo of the person, and it's like, oh, lose 50 pounds.
Yeah, and just swipe it off.
But they all look fake. As much as they're pseudo real, there is that uncanny valley thing where you're like, there's something about this. This is really off-putting.
Yeah.
But sure, they didn't have to pay a model or a photographer, so I guess that's good.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I guess that's good, but is it in the long run?
Well, I mean, it's good for them.
No, I know what you're saying.
But for 5 seconds, it is though, because really, the other thing is, it makes me think, well, there's a product I'm not interested. There's a product I'm not interested in.
So, Printopia is a graphic novel. There's the story. Is it also a comic? Is it all, or is it?
No, it's just
just
an original book. Yeah,
just an original book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to continue with these characters, or do you want to?
I do. I've actually started writing a sequel called Printopia West because I want them to move to LA. I've been living here now for 7 years, and I feel now I've been here long enough. I could do something set here that will feel authentic.
Sure, I get that, especially where you live.
Yeah. Well, I would set it. I would set it.
You can't set it in Brentwood.
No. Silver Lake is a good environment for these two girls to live in. So, Yeah, so that's something I definitely want to pursue more of.
Yeah.
Because there's different kinds of creative oddballs here than New York creative oddballs.
Now, does somebody like yourself, do you make your living writing these graphic novels and things, or are you like off? I actually I do drawings of butter for German travel magazines. That's how I pay my,
Oh, if only.
Yeah.
I dare to dream of drawing dairy products.
But you know what I mean? It's like, it's always, well, my real money is like, you meet these guys like, he's got a band, but his real money comes from on a commercial 10 years ago. We went real butter. Punk.
Oh,
it's like, okay.
No, if you're lucky, you've got those kind of. There is no way to make a living doing alternative comics, exclusively. So that's where you do side gigs and illustration or whatever else.
Album covers
comes your way.
Yeah. Album covers and what have you.
Yeah, what have you? Yes, fall into. But
and there's still a need for people to do it.
Yeah. And, that's also where you do comics that are not your own comics. It's like, okay,
you illustrate
I'm
other
people.
people.
Illustrate something here and there.
To that end, tell me about Naked Clone. Is it Naked Clone?
Oh, the Riff Tracks novel.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I'm friends with those guys. So, that when I was stumbling over my words before, my elocution was poor. The Bad Book Podcast is Mike Nelson and Connor Listoka's podcast, 372 pages. We'll never get back. And I'm a big fan of that show. And so when they kind of merged their interests of terrible books with terrible movies,
right,
and their sort of overall fascination with Nick Nolte,
because it isn't. We should say the full title is Naked Clone: A Nick Nolte Mystery.
Yes, yes, yeah. They all of those guys. I think it's six or seven writers on that. They sort of did, what do you call them? Exquisite Corpse.
Exquisite Corpse, yeah.
Yeah, where one wrote
Everybody
one
has a
chapter, passed
yeah.
it along,
Right.
and then but it reads quite smoothly, I think. But yeah, it's just this insane novel about Nick Nolte, basically borderline homeless Nick Nolte, as a detective. And all modesty aside, who better to do the cover than yours
it's beautiful.
truly.
Yeah, it's so in addition to Printopia, you have another book called That's Some Business You're In, which oddly is a quote from your father.
Yep.
Which seems to be now knowing that he was a failed novelist. Seems to be self-defensive.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, it's a title that...
By the way, I say failed novelist. My father couldn't write a novel if he put a gun in his mouth, so I'm not judging.
Yeah, it's funny because I would say he was an abortive novelist.
Right.
Which is worse. Like, at least if he had put it out there and it failed, at least he would have...
failed to achieve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to finish, dude.
Yeah, I'm actually I will be reading his book finally because a paperback edition of this is going to come out next year, and I'm adding a chunk to it. And one of the things I'm adding is a chapter. I realized what's missing in this book, and it's a chapter devoted to my parents, where I'm going to put in some of my mom's art.
Oh, great!
That's people finally get to see some of her art.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good.
A little excerpt from his writing. I just think that would be kind of a nice way to pay tribute to them. Right now, That's Some Business You're In is available through zoop.gg.
What's .gg? Is that a thing?
I don't know.
Is there a bobfingerman.com?
There is a bobfingerman.com with a link. Yeah,
that's easier.
Yeah, and Printopia you can order straight from Amazon.
Right.
That
and by
makes
the
it
way,
easy.
people should know, Fingerman, a great nom de plume for a cartoonist, happens to be your real name.
Yeah, I sure didn't choose it. Yeah. I would have chosen something a little snappier.
No, but it sticks.
Oh, yeah, it's memorable. That's the thing. I actually contemplated changing my name about 7 years ago. after my dad died, I thought, yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly.
a good name for our era. Mm-hmm. Fistman.
No, I was going to take my mom's
Clench
maiden name.
Fistman. What's your mom's maiden name?
Magnus.
Yeah.
That's
I like Finger, but yeah, I've known you. I know you too well.
Yeah, it's too late in the game.
Yeah.
Too late in the game.
Yeah. Didn't we used to call you Fingerbot?
Maybe.
I've
been
so.
called many things.
No, but I remember just seeing you going Fingerbot. I swear.
It's possible.
Yeah. And what are you working on now? You go home today. What do you go back to work on? Printopia 2 or?
No, I'm actually revising an older book of mine called Recess Pieces. To hopefully get that out next year.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
And do you have several publishers or just do you deal with one publishing house basically?
Well, right now I have a new publisher. The Printopia is a new publisher called Cosmic Lion Productions, and I'm very happy with them. That book came out great, so I'm sure I'm going to be doing more with them. But yeah, I don't like to lock myself down to any one.
Right. Harder to hit a moving target. I always say that. That's why I have seven careers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's good to spread it around a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Bob Fingerman, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry. That's the perfect ending.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Back in the olden times, before TV, if you can envision such a thing, going to the movies could be, if you wanted, an all-day affair. You'd get a newsreel, some shorts like The Three Stooges or a Dogville comedy, which were these little short comedies with dogs acting like people, a Betty Boop cartoon, and then the main feature, and then a second feature, a B-movie or programmer. B-movies were produced to fill out the bill. They were made for less money and lower production values. They didn't get the big stars or the big schedules, and by and large, they weren't made by the big studios. The big studios were Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Columbia, Universal, and later 20th Century Fox. B-movies came from a place called Poverty Row, the home of studios like Republic, Monogram, and the Producers Releasing Corporation, or PRC. The name Poverty Row was in regards to real estate. While Universal and Warner Brothers owned sprawling lots in the San Fernando Valley and MGM and Columbia were south of Beverly Hills, Poverty Row Studios were crammed into a low-rent district in Hollywood, over by Gower and Western, a neighborhood largely full of car repair shops and seedy hotels. The Poverty Row Studios churned out westerns, gangster films, and horror flicks, which is not to say they didn't produce some great films and great filmmakers. Val Lewton made such classics as The Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie on Poverty Row. Joseph H. Lewis made Gun Crazy from a script by Dalton Trumbo. And Poverty Row was the home of the films of Edgar Ulmer. Edgar Ulmer was born in what is now known as the Czech Republic. He moved to Vienna, where he worked with Billy Wilder and Fred Zinnemann before they moved to America. Ulmer came to America in 1926 with F.W. Murnau to work on his film Sunrise. Now, Ulmer's first film was 1933's Damaged Lives, which was a low-budget exploitation film about the horrors of venereal disease. No one ever makes a movie about the glory of venereal disease. Anyway, Ulmer followed that up with The Black Cat for Universal, with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi playing his sidekick.
Karloff? Sidekick?
Fuck you! Karloff does not deserve to smell my shit!
The Black Cat was a huge hit. It was one of Universal's biggest moneymakers of the year, and Edgar Ulmer was on a direct trajectory to the big time. So what happened? Cherchez la femme, my friend. Cherchez la femme. Edgar Ulmer was having an affair with a woman named Shirley Kassler. So, well, Shirley Kassler was married to a guy named Max Alexander. So, well, Max Alexander was the nephew of a guy named Carl Laemmle. And Carl Laemmle ran Universal Studios. And Carl Laemmle was a family man who came to his nephew's defense and personally sunk Edgar Ulmer not only at Universal, but at every A-list studio in town. The only place Edgar Ulmer could find work was Poverty Row. Cut to 3 years later, and a producer from Poverty Row named Leon Fromkes reads a book called Detour by a guy named Martin Goldsmith. Detour is an examination of guilt and paranoia. The story of a down-on-his-luck jazz musician named Al Roberts. Al is stuck in New York with no money, and he decides to hitchhike across the country to be reunited with his girlfriend, Susan. Susan is a nightclub singer who's out in Hollywood trying to make a go of it, and she's not having much luck either. We catch up with Al tired, hungry, and desperate, walking through the American desert in a wool suit on the verge of dehydration, hoping to get a ride to California. Finally, his luck turns, and he gets picked up by a guy who's heading all the way into Los Angeles. Only things don't go quite according to plan. A freak accident, a very bad decision, and before you know it, Al finds himself being blackmailed by a treacherous sociopath named Vera. Vera has Al over a barrel and doesn't mind rolling it off a cliff if it'll help her get what she wants. You might say Al's plans took a detour. Thank you. Not long after Leon Fromkes scooped up the rights to Detour, actor John Garfield read the novel and expressed an interest in playing Al. Now, Garfield was no Poverty Row actor. He was a big studio A-list star. He wanted Fromkes to sell the book to Warner Brothers as a vehicle for himself, with fellow A-listers Ann Sheridan playing Susan and legendary actress and later director Ida Lupino to play Vera. That cast I would have liked to have seen. However, Fromkes believed in the book so strongly that he refused to sell it to Warner Brothers. That was a ballsy move. Instead, he asked Warner Brothers to loan Garfield out to him so he could make the movie at PRC. But Warner Brothers was butthurt, so they made Fromkes an offer that in no way he could take, and he didn't, and the deal fell apart. And Fromkes found himself back at square one with the rights to a book that no one wanted to make. He hired the novel's author, Martin Goldsmith, to adapt the novel into a screenplay. But Martin had a caveat. He didn't want to change anything. That makes sense. That's what happens when you hire an author to adapt his own book. He doesn't want to fix it. He made it himself. He thinks it's already fixed. Fromkes agreed, and he promised Goldsmith that he wouldn't change a thing without his approval, an agreement that, today, is virtually unheard of. Martin Goldsmith was a good writer. He went on to write other scripts for other films and TV series such as Playhouse 90, Gunsmoke, The Twilight Zone. With Goldsmith's finished script in hand, Fromkes gave it to the best director he could afford. And that was our old friend, Edgar Ulmer, now known as the Frank Capra of Poverty Row. Ulmer had a great script. Unfortunately, he had too much of it. Goldsmith's draft was 144 pages. At 1 minute a page, which is the average of a script, that came in at around 2.5 hours. Nope. Goldsmith had to make some cuts. In fact, he had to cut the script in half. The final shooting draft came in at 69 pages. It was called Poverty Row for a reason. These studios didn't have any money. PRC gave Edgar Ulmer a budget of $30,000, which is a little over $500,000 today. And that kind of budget allowed for a 14-day shooting schedule and very limited use of sets and locations. And stars? Now, as I talk about the making of the film Detour, I'm going to talk around the specifics of the story, because if you haven't seen it yet, you're going to want to see it, and I don't want to ruin it for you. For the lead role of sad sack jazzbo Al Roberts, Ulmer cast a guy named Tom Neal, who was, literally, the poor man's John Garfield. Neal came from Evanston, Illinois, and he worked his way through college as an amateur boxer. A good one, apparently. He had a great, soulful face, and he gave Al a sense of fatalism and cynicism that elevated Detour out of a standard B-movie potboiler into the greater than the sum of its parts living nightmare that it became. Al's elusive love was played by Claudia Drake, who didn't have anything to do in the movie except smile and answer the phone. I think we all know whose scenes hit the floor when Goldsmith had to cut the script in half. But Susan was never the role. Vera was the role. Al makes the mistake of picking up Vera while hitchhiking across the country, picking her up in his car, not picking her up in the romantic sense. He might as well have draped a couple of rattlesnakes around his neck. Things did not go well. And in casting the role of Vera, Edgar Ulmer outdid himself. Now, Savage was only 24 years old at the time of the production, and although she was a charming, witty, professional actress, there was something going on deep down inside that woman that she managed to pull out and unleash on the screen. It's funny, if you see photos of Anne Savage, she doesn't even look like Vera, but there's no special effects makeup in the movie. It's just a case of the inside of a character showing up on the outside as well. Even critics at the time were fooled. Again, Anne Savage was a very attractive, lovely lady, but in seeing only Vera, one reviewer said she had, quote, a face like an upside-down bowling pin. Oof. Fun fact, when Anne Savage began her career, she supported herself by working as a bowling instructor. The lady had a 187 average. With no money and no time, Edgar Ulmer had to convey New York's Greenwich Village jazz scene, a cross-country hitchhiking trip, and the seedy underbelly of post-war Los Angeles. But because of his budget, he couldn't stray more than 15 miles away from PRC's Gower Gulch studio. Necessity being the mother of invention, Ulmer filled the screen with his cast's desperate faces. Remember, he started out with F.W. Murnau, and Detour's sets share a sense of the German master's expressionistic flair. Rooms are sparse, barren, and painted with light and shadow. Process shots give the story a dreamlike surrealism. Detour isn't Al's story, it's his nightmare. The problem is, he's awake. The critics agreed. The LA Times said, one of the most poignant and disturbing stories to reach the screen. You're not looking at a picture, you're right in it, and suffering along with the man whose troubles are being told. Reappraising the film some years later, the Times added, Detour is a riveting study of guilt and paranoia that is generally regarded as Edgar Ulmer's masterpiece. Strongly reminiscent of the films of Fritz Lang, it's exciting, it's often amusing, loaded with hard-boiled, slangy dialogue, and set in seedy diners and cheap hotel rooms. End quote. In his book, King of the Bees, Myron Meisel called Detour an exercise in sustained perversity. Despite the film's success, Edgar Ulmer never returned to the big studios. You cross Carl Laemmle, you pay the price. As you may recall, Ulmer had an affair with Shirley Kassler, the wife of Carl Laemmle's nephew Max Alexander. Well, Max and Shirley divorced, and Edgar and Shirley got married. Shirley Kassler, now Shirley Ulmer, worked as the script supervisor on most of Ulmer's films and wrote the scripts for several. They had a daughter, they never divorced, and are in fact still side by side, albeit today at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Anne Savage worked steadily in film and television throughout the 40s and 50s. In the mid-1950s, she moved to New York with her husband, an agent named Bert Darmond. When he passed, he was 18 years older than Anne. She returned to Los Angeles to live with her mother. She got her pilot's license, was part owner of a tool company, and because she liked to work and stay busy, she took a secretarial course and became a docket clerk at a law firm here in Los Angeles. It was around this time, the mid-1980s, that Detour had a resurgence in popularity, along with a renewed interest in the work of Edgar Ulmer as a director. A July 1988 cover story on the film in the magazine Film Facts is one of the major sources for this piece. And what of Tom Neal the sad-eyed B-movie journeyman who breathed such life into Detour's L. Roberts? Well, Tom's story reads like Detour. Now, Tom was an accomplished actor, but he had an eye for the ladies. And unfortunately, bad decisions came as naturally to Tom Neal as they did to his on-screen alter ego, Al Roberts. Tom worked non-stop throughout the 1940s, playing, as they say, little roles in big pictures and big roles in little pictures. And he was every bit as busy off-screen as he was on-screen, being linked romantically at one time or another to, among others, Joan Crawford, Ava Gardner, Dixie Dunbar, Lana Turner, Dixie Ray, that's 2 Dixies, Vicki Lon, Rosalind Russell, and actress Barbara Payton. In 1951, Barbara Payton was engaged to popular French actor Franchot Tone. Then she canceled the engagement and got engaged to Tom Neal. They were preparing to leave for San Francisco, where they were planning on tying the knot, when Barbara decided to, what the heck, go out on a date with Franchot Tone. The date went well, so the next night they went on another one. But when they came home at around 1:15 in the morning, Tom Neal was waiting for them. How do we know the exact time? It's in the police report. Neal confronted Franchot Tone, who took a swing at him. It missed. Now remember, Neal was a former boxer, and by his own account, quote, "I hit him very hard, knocking him about 10 feet. Then I hit him 3 or 4 more times." Now in today's culture, Neal would probably be celebrated as a cuckolded bro standing up for himself. But this scandal got a lot of play in the newspapers, and at one point, Neal was quoted as saying, "Regardless of the notoriety of the thing, it does get your name in front of people." And that thing sounded just a little too cavalier. And add that to the fact that Franchot Tone was a pretty famous, beloved actor and a lot more well-known than Tom Neal. The end result being that 1951-era Americans were turned off by Neal's antics. He was regarded as a bully and a thug. Barbara Payton seemed to escape any public condemnation, which doesn't really track, but there you have it. Franchot Tone went to the hospital with a concussion, the marriage between Neal and Payton was scotched, and the marriage between Payton and Tone was back on, although he needed a couple of days before he could walk anywhere, much less down the aisle. Tone and Payton did tie the knot and were happily married for 53 whole days. One of the reasons for their divorce? Payton had an affair with Tom Neal. Years later, she commented, "Neal was a beautiful hunk of man. He had a chemical buzz for me that sent red peppers down my thighs." Okay. Neal's career dried up. It was a combination of the public's distaste for his off-screen antics and the emergence of the method, a new style of screen acting personified by Marlon Brando and the Actors Studio. This made Neal's road company Bogart look stylized and outdated. So Neal moved to Palm Springs, and he started a landscaping company, but still clung to aspirations of a comeback. He had even written his own comeback vehicle, a detective story called 4:20 a.m. And no, this was long before that had a different meaning. Tom Neal would play the film's lead role, Steve Granite, private investigator. Again, the times had passed him by, and he just didn't seem to have gotten the memo. Tom Neal spent his days in Palm Springs doing landscaping, and his nights working as a doorman and a greeter at a Palm Springs bar called the Dollhouse. Now, this was the 1950s when Palm Springs was Palm Springs. It was full of movie stars and famous people, and no doubt more than a few of them knew or had probably even worked with Neal in the past. If it bothered him, as he showed them to their tables at the Dollhouse, he did not let on. This was right around the time that Neal discovered Christian Science, which gave him some comfort, and he married Patricia Fenton, a flight attendant he met at church. For a while, Tom Neal seemed happy. His life was on course. He and Patricia had a son, Tom Neal Jr., but during the delivery, doctors discovered that Patricia was suffering from cervical cancer. Observant Christian scientists, Tom and Patricia turned to an aggressive course of praying to cure the disease. And when that didn't work, they tried medicine. But by then it was too late, and Patricia passed on March 11th, 1958. She was only 29. Tom met his second wife, 24-year-old Gail Cloak, at a restaurant in Palm Springs called Il Destino. They married less than a month after they met. Mistake! Patricia's passing did not shake Tom's faith in Christian Science, however. Gail talked about him waking her up at 4 o'clock in the morning to pray and study the Bible before he left for his landscaping job. Gosh, that sounds like fun. It was around this time that the acting bug came back. Tom tried to get another movie project going called Who Killed the Black Dahlia? This would have had Tom playing a detective who falls in love with Elizabeth Short as he investigates her murder. Fell in love with her memory, I guess. He couldn't get any interest going. His landscaping business took a downturn, his movie career refused to resuscitate, and Tom's marriage began to suffer. He became impossibly jealous, at one point telling his young wife Gail that if they were together at a social function, she was not allowed to talk to any man there for more than 30 seconds. The fun just keeps coming. Gail begged Tom to seek psychiatric help, but instead he turned to prayer. Hey, it didn't work once. Maybe it won't work again. After one particular argument turned physical, Tom pulled his son, Tom Jr., out of school, emptied the bank account, and returned to his family home in Evanston, Illinois, leaving Gail behind, alone, with no money. So she got a job at the Palm Springs Tennis Club because, I imagine, Gail liked to eat. And soon after, she began dating a tennis pro there. Somehow, the word that his wife had the audacity to date someone in the wake of his abandonment reached Neil all the way in Illinois. And when Gail came home from work on March 31st, 1965, Tom Neil was sitting in the house waiting. That appears to be one of his signature moves. Gail was terrified and suspicious. Tom had already gone through her things and found several notes from her new boyfriend, who was also married. Fun fact. Tom suggested they go out in the town, and Gail agreed, most likely just to keep the peace. According to a story on Neil by Patrick Gatov in Palm Springs Life magazine, Tom and Gail tied one on, woke up the next day late and hung over, and at Neil's urging, went out to lunch, had some more drinks, went back home. Gail, now half drunk and half hungover, collapsed on the couch. Tom approached her on the couch to get something going. She turned away. Tom withdrew, angrily, and a moment later, shot her in the head with a .45. Again, bad decisions. District Attorney Roland Wilson had a solid case. First-degree murder, open and shut. Neil claimed that the gun went off by accident, but apparently, you can't fire a .45 by accident. You need to simultaneously squeeze the trigger while manually depressing the safety at the back of the barrel. But the district attorney forgot one thing. Tom Neil was an actor, and when he took the stand, he put on a show. He charmed that jury and managed to reduce his charge to involuntary manslaughter. As Gatov says in his article, Murder on the Desert, one step above complete exoneration. The judge, who was not swayed by Neil's performance, gave him the maximum sentence for involuntary manslaughter, 15 years. Neil served 6 years before getting paroled in December of 1971. He moved to Studio City to Radford Avenue, directly across the street from what is now CBS Television Studios, where they shot Seinfeld. Sitting there in his apartment, staring at a movie studio right across the street, he must have felt like his comeback was just out of reach, and so it would remain. He died of heart failure 8 months after his parole. One last note. Neil was granted parole in the period of time between the end of his trial and his sentencing. One of the things he did was visit the local cemetery, Desert Memorial Park, with a professional photographer in tow to put on a show for the local papers of his grief and anguish at the tragic death of his wife. that he had been so unjustly held accountable for. Holding a bouquet of flowers, he sat on a gravestone, his head buried in his hands. Two things. The contact sheets of the photo shoot are still in existence, clearly showing Neil trying on and abandoning several different poses in the hopes of capturing just the right grief look. Holding his head in one hand, holding his head in two hands, looking up at the sky, looking down at the ground. And, oh yeah, it wasn't his wife's grave either. She'd been buried in a different cemetery.
Hear that? That's the beginning of a journey powered by the confidence that comes from driving a vehicle so reliable, it's backed by a 10-year, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty. Where your journey ends? Well, that's up to you. Visit your local Kia dealer today. Kia, movement that inspires.
See retailer for warranty details. Always drive safely. Limited inventory available.
And now, on with the show.
It's a brisk, sun-dappled autumn day, high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in the People's Republic of California in the former United States. My guest today has been here before. He is an author of quite renown. He has written biographies of Marlon Brando, Lawrence Tierney. He wrote with our friend Jeff Abrahams, The Show Won't Go On, the book that includes everything you need to know about everybody who ever died on stage. And his new book, it's one of those things when a book and the time for this book coincide. I'm thinking of when Slaughterhouse-Five came out. Kurt Vonnegut labored for years trying to click, and then finally that book came out at just the right time. And this book is also one of those. It's called Shemp! Exclamation point. But then again, when has Shemp ever not said with an exclamation point? The biography of the Three Stooges, Shemp Howard, the face of film comedy. Please welcome your friend and mine, Bert Kearns.
Great to be back with Shemp. Yeah.
Now, I think the obvious question, let me mirror what I bet your publisher said. Bert, why now?
Well,
which is not to say, like, I opened up the first page and I was like, oh, I'm in. This, like, I'm like, this. It's so, what's so fascinating about this book before we even get going is it wasn't 100 years ago, but the world was so flipping different. And it was so rough and brutal.
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like people are spoiled these days. So yeah, why did you come up with this book? Now, the Three Stooges obviously are legendary. Get into that.
Right. Well, how do you follow Marlon Brando? That was my last book. And that was, where do I go after Marlon Brando? Who else has the sexual charisma and just the intensity of Marlon Brando? You've got to go to Shemp.
I was going to say you found it.
Right. But basically, when we were coming up with an idea for another project, at the time we found that there had not been a book about Shemp Howard. There had been books about his brother Mo, his brother Curly, Larry Fine, even Joe DeRita and Joe Besser, Mousy Garner, who was a replacement for the Stooges early on.
And we all had to read the Emil Sitka book in junior high school.
There you go. There was no book about Shemp. And so I got on the Shemp trail, and it seemed like an interesting project.
Well, let's before we get into Shemp, we need to unpack the bizarre, timeless appeal of the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges really are the gender they prove that comedy is gender specific.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
It's violent slapstick.
Women don't like the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges are to men what Sex and the City is to women. The other side just looks at it and scratches their head. But you know, there's something so primitive but appealing about the Three Stooges. Like to this day, you know, we're both adults. We have homes and families, but like if they're on, I can't not watch them.
Yes, they're funny. It's basic vaudeville. It's primal comedy. It's
well put.
You look today. I mean, who are the successors to the Three Stooges? America's Funniest Home Videos. Every time, you know, dad gets a baseball in the crotch or somebody's hitting the head with a rake, you know, Jackass, or even WWE, World Wrestling, the mixture of comedy and violence it's a primal thing, especially for men, I think. And I think that's why women don't like it. Moms didn't like it. Dads would laugh when we were kids and watching it. Moms would say, you can't hit your brother on the head with a hammer. That's not good. People get hurt.
That's really well observed about like Jackass and America's Funniest Videos. I never thought about, but it's true. And now on Instagram Reels, watching a cat fall off a shelf, the Marx Brothers doesn't have that same appeal. Everyone will tell you, and I will tell you, like, well, the Marx Brothers are better than the Three Stooges. You know, they're certainly classier. But there's something about the Three Stooges. It's like, you know, Leonard Cohen and the Ramones. Well, everyone with Leonard Cohen, obviously, but people go see the Ramones. You put that on. It's as simple as you can be, and it gets right to it.
It's visceral and it's funny. And as you watch the Three Stooges, you can see that there's no effects to, you know, Curly getting his nose put to a grindstone or getting whacked in the head. You can see that there's no reaction to that. He doesn't get hurt. Although in real life, in going through the research of this book, you find out they did get hurt.
Yeah, they did get hurt. In fact,
they really did.
In fact, we think Shemp, we'll get to this, but we think it killed Shemp.
And yes, and Curly.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you think about it. Yeah.
So these guys, they're Lithuanian Jewish immigrants. Their parents were they born in the States, or they,
all born in Manhattan. There were five brothers. Everybody was born in Manhattan except for the baby who was Curly. Shemp was the third of five brothers, the oldest to go into show business. He was born in 1895. His younger brother, Mo, showed up 2 years later, and then Curly came 6 years after Mo.
Right. So
Shemp was the oldest of the Horowitz brothers.
And these guys grew up turn of the century New York. I mean, they did. Their mother was a realtor.
Their mother was a realtor. She was a real go-getter.
Yeah, they were immigrants, so they were self-starters, aggressive, but there weren't a lot of opportunities at that time for, as we like to say, non-college educated whites.
Right. And there were theaters everywhere. There were vaudeville houses everywhere. And not far from where they lived in Bath Beach, Brooklyn, there was a movie studio, Vitagraph. It was called Vitagraph Pictures at the time. It was in Flatbush in Brooklyn.
Right.
And Mo, at an early age, made his way down there.
Right.
And as he got into pictures.
But movies at that time were not like, there was vaudeville. There was the legitimate theater. Then there was music hall, vaudeville, burlesque. The movies was below burlesque. Like, it wasn't like, I'm going to work really hard and break into the movies. The movies was the bottom rung of it. I was reading a book about Artie Shaw, who was a psychopath. And he started a movie, and he was just bitching that it was so beneath him the entire time that the crew genuinely planned to drop a light on him. You know, so movies didn't become the movies until, you know, the 30s.
Until the 30s, yeah.
Talkies, yeah. So, but for them, it was a paycheck. It was a money gig.
Yeah, right. But the two teenage brothers, Mo and Shemp, started out in vaudeville. They did a blackface act. You know, they ripped off their act from a legitimate African-American duo, and they took their jokes and they went out, and that's how they got started. That lasted a couple of years. Mo went off on his own.
I've never heard of white performers ripping off black performers for greater success. Hang on, I should write this down. C. Presley, Elvis.
but everything's really started for them in around 1925 when they hooked up with a childhood friend of Mo's named Ted Healy. And Ted Healy was a popular vaudeville song and dance man, comedian, singer, and who worked with a large group of what were known as stooges at the time. He'd be singing a song and he'd be interrupted by somebody sitting in the audience, and that person would come up on stage. There'd be a little bit of comedy. And then Ted Healy would end the bit by slapping the stooge in the face loud enough and hard enough so that it could be heard in the last row, in the last balcony.
Now, in that regard, was stooge used as what today we would call a plant? Or was it more of a clown, just like, they got some stooges that are going to, they came out of the audience, so it seems like they were a plant.
For the most part, they were plants. With Healy, he had such a large team. He had 8 or 9 of them. So there were acrobats, tumblers. There were all kinds of people surrounding him. It wasn't just, Mo and Shemp. There were maybe, sometimes 6 or 8 of them working with him. So it was a combination of that. And they didn't call them stooges at the time. That was the thing. The stooges term came later.
These guys don't have a message they have to get out to people. They are trying to physically survive, and both Healy and Mo were incredibly driven guys that just elbowed their way to the front of the line. And it was inevitable that they would come to friction. But, the original Stooges were Mo, Shemp, and Ted Healy, correct?
It was Mo, Shemp, Ted Healy, and Ted Healy's brother-in-law was another stooge, and a couple of others. Was
it Ted Healy's brother that was too old and frail to take Ted and Mo's hits?
Eddie Moran.
What you talk about in the book, which is really interesting, is people always think like, well, it's all fake. It's very skilled, sleight of hand and what's the phrase I'm looking for? Misdirection. No, these guys were kicking the shit out of each other, and a lot of people tapped out because they couldn't take it. Eddie Moran was one, and there was another guy that was in the book talking about he was too old to take the hits on stage and would literally kind of fade out of the scene because he was like, this hurts.
Right, leave it to them. And that led to one of the myths about Shemp was that he was this frightened soul and very timid, and that he left the act originally because he was afraid of Ted Healy and was afraid of getting hit. And
right.
And that really wasn't the case. He didn't like getting hit anymore, but he also happened to be the star of the act and wanted more money to get hit. And he wanted more money. And when he didn't get it, he left for the first time.
Shemp and Mo are brothers, and they're in this act with this other guy. And Shemp is a lot more popular than Mo. That doesn't go over well. So Mo is threatened by Shemp. Ted Healy is threatened by Mo. And everybody hates each other, and they're hitting each other for an act. So it was a perfect storm of abuse. And then, and people always assume, like, people that even know, people watching this Stooges, like the Stooges come on TV, and if it's Curly, you go, oh, great. And if it's Shemp, you go, okay. And then if it's Joe, you're like, oh, fuck this. It's Joe. I always preferred Shemp and Larry. I always preferred Shemp to Curly. I thought Shemp was more subtle and funny. And my favorite thing to do with the Stooges when I get older and get more sophisticated is I like to watch Larry when he's not the focus of the scene.
Right. Well, I mean, that was the thing. Again, Shemp was with the Stooges in the early days. Till about 1931. That's when he quit, and he went off onto a solo career on stage and eventually in films, pretty quickly into films. Mo had their younger brother on the sidelines, hanging out at rehearsals, ready to jump in. I think they knew Shemp was going to be leaving. Curly was on the sidelines, ready to jump in, and jumped in right away.
Right. This is their younger brother, Zeppo. No, they called him Babe, but it was Curly.
It was Curly.
Right.
And then in 1946, when Curly had a debilitating stroke, Shemp was an established character actor. He was doing very well for himself with his own film shorts. You know, the Stooges were known for the short films they made. That's an interesting thing because we don't have that anymore. Yeah.
You and I grew up watching the Three Stooges on television, and their shorts are all like 10 minutes. Yeah.
About 15 minutes. Yeah.
15 minutes, 10 minutes. And those would normally be in a program. You know, you go to see, there'd be a newsreel and a couple of shorts and then a feature. And the Three Stooges were the only people making those shorts. There were lots of people making them. The Little Rascals is another example. And the only ones we know about were the ones that made enough that they could be cut down and syndicated to television in the 50s. So there's this whole genre of film comedy that we don't really know. We know about 10% of it because nothing else has survived. Shemp was openly competing with the Stooges during that period in the 40s. He had a couple of his own series of shorts. And this is the thing that really blew my mind. He was in a comedy team with Lon Chaney Jr.
Well, this is the thing. Shemp had a very varied career as a character actor. You know, aside from the shorts, which he made from 1931 all the way through the time he joined the Three Stooges, he was making shorts on his own or being teamed up.
Yeah, and he shows up in movies. He shows up in Abbott and Costello movies.
Well, that was the thing. He was in 5 Abbott and Costello pictures. He was in the one that made Abbott and Costello superstars, which was Buck Privates.
Buck Privates, yeah.
The enlistment comedy in 1941. And what happened was Laurel and Hardy was so successful that Universal Pictures couldn't churn out Abbott and Costello pictures fast enough. So they started making Abbott and Costello pictures without Abbott and Costello. And they made a picture called San Antonio Rose, in which Shemp and Lon Chaney Jr. were basically the Abbott and Costello team in this picture.
Yeah. Now, what year is San Antonio Rose?
This is 1942, I believe.
Okay, so this is...
Actually, 1941.
This is the same year he's playing the Wolfman. It's the same year he broke. Yeah. So it must have been before the Wolfman, because after that, I would think that he wouldn't want to do it. But yeah, that's the year he broke and like, I don't know, do this.
Yeah. And he wasn't funny. Lon Chaney wasn't funny. And this is it's a frightening.
You're funny or you're not.
Yeah. Because he's far more violent with Shemp than Ted Healy was or Moe was. I mean, he's whacking Shemp around through this entire picture, and it hurts to watch.
Well, there's a story that, Lon Chaney Jr. is such a fascinating guy. And it's one of those things where, like, not all actors are crazy, but some actors are really crazy. Lon he was a big guy. He had a lot of issues, had daddy issues and had alcohol issues, and was a violent drunk. And was drunk a lot. So he would, the rumor is, and I'm sure you know this story, that he had a trailer at Universal Studios. He had his trailer, and then he had another trailer that was basically empty, where he and Broderick Crawford would get drunk and wrestle.
That sounds right. And Shemp made 2 pictures with Broderick Crawford. So there you go.
Yeah.
There's the connection.
Who's the looks? I can't tell. They gave Shemp worked a lot because he makes Broderick Crawford. Broderick Crawford's the good looking one.
Exactly. He was. Yeah.
Yeah. And so while this is going on and Shemp has his own film career and he's doing okay. He's making a living, and it's funny. He's got all these guys are married. They have kids. And there's a really great story in the book that he's got a house. I don't know where he lives down here.
Toluca Lake.
Out here in the valley. And show business has a caste system like anything else. And there are these big parties that, like, Louis B. Mayer is having these parties on his yacht, or Thomas Ince on his yacht or his mansion. And these people are going up to William Randolph Hearst, castle up there in near Calabasas, Hearst Castle. Shemp has a house that is sort of the headquarters for his social group. And they're all film actors. It's people like Broderick Crawford and the Stooges and stuff, but like, this is their group and they don't mix.
Yeah.
They don't go to Louis B. Mayer's house. They don't go to Thomas Ince's yacht, but they all, and Shemp was the guy who's like, yeah, come on over. He was like it was tribal. They protected their tribe.
But it was that B list of, character actors and comedy writers who they hung with. There was a caste system, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a caste system. And they just, I like that it never entered their mind to mix with the A-list stars. It was like, what are you doing here? It's like actors and game show hosts. You go away. It's such a, and now that's gone too. All of our actors are game show hosts. And so in the meantime, Curly, whose real name is
Jerome Horowitz.
Yeah. Is the star of the Three Stooges. They're at Columbia. They're cranking out movies. How many shorts did the Stooges make with Curly?
I know it's over 100.
Yeah. And
a lot.
Over 100. And and then when they're not making films, they're traveling the country. And this is all Mo. Like, Mo is like a real, even though he was born in the States, such an immigrant mentality of like, we've got a day off. Let's do a show here and a show there. Like, they're getting it while the iron is hot,
It was nonstop because they weren't working a full year making these shorts. They were making, they work 4 or 5 weeks. Then they'd have a couple of months off. Then they'd come back to the studio. And it seemed that every moment they weren't working at the studio, Mo had them on the road.
Yeah. And he's killing his brother.
Yeah.
He's literally physically killing his younger brother.
Yeah. Curly was, this ball of wonder. He was like our Belushi or Chris Farley. He was like this big kid.
Very much the first, one of the first of that archetype. For sure.
Yeah, because off camera, he was a ladies' man. He was a heavy drinker. He overate. He had all sorts of, ailments because of that. And he started having...
None of that's surprising.
Yeah. He started having mini strokes, and he'd have mini strokes, and he'd have strokes on the road, and they would keep going. They would keep working.
What is the difference between a stroke and a mini stroke, just so people...
Well, I think a mini stroke is one where you don't have the lasting effect from it.
Right. Yeah. You feel a little fucked up, but you can keep working, keep traveling.
You keep going. It affects your timing, I guess.
Yeah.
What's most interesting is that, Shemp had been signed to Universal, and he was doing shorts there and appearing in a lot of films. He got signed to Columbia, and he was there around 1942 and when he showed up at Columbia, and he showed up at Columbia both to appear in films and appear in shorts. But he was working with the Three Stooges directors. He was working with the Three Stooges supporting cast, and he was working with old reheated scripts from the 30s that Curly had starred in. And it seemed that it happened at the same time Curly really started to slip. And so what I could see from this was that Mo already knew we're going to be losing Curly soon. Let's get Shemp back on board.
Yeah, he was younger than the other ones, but he was just so goddamn unhealthy.
Yeah. And finally, in 1946, he had a stroke on set right before they were going to film a big pie fight, and that was it. And shortly after that, Mo convinced.
What a terrible call! Hold the pie fight.
Yeah, they didn't hold the pie fight, by the way. Mo called a taxi to send him home and went in and shot the scene.
What a bastard! I send him to the hospital. We got a pie fight to shoot. Priorities, people. Priorities. And so, yeah, and Shemp didn't, this is the thing we also needed to talk about, because people joke about it, but it's true of Curly and it's true of Shemp. In addition to, it's the 30s and 40s, we didn't have all of the medical advances that we've had now. And these guys are hard living guys. And he's getting, even though it's for stage, he's getting hit in the head all day, every day. And it does have a cumulative effect.
Yeah. And he was nearing 60 years old. There were reports that Shemp had a mini stroke or two on the road, although it was never confirmed. There were times when they had to take some time off from the studio, and it was never said that was the reason.
Now, how old was Curly when he had the big stroke?
I think it was 48.
Yeah.
He was 48 when he died. So it came before that. So he was in his early 40s.
So these guys also, they're in their early 40s, but it's like today, it's like somebody in their 70s.
Yeah.
They're just like broken. Even, I was watching a TV movie from 1972 and all these, these sweaty leathered guys, and they're probably all like 41, 42 years old. Simon Oakland and Claude Akins and Ralph Meeker, all these slabs of beef, the sweat and bourbon. It was an unhealthy, hard living time. So Curly doesn't die, but he has to leave the group.
Yeah.
And they can't stop. Did Shemp want to go back? Was he like, oh, fuck this?
No, Shemp was reluctant. And when he agreed to it, it was to be on a temporary basis. He signed a contract saying he's going to do it temporarily until Curly could get back into the act. But Shemp was a real mensch. He was a family guy.
Yeah.
And despite whatever control Mo had over the group psychologically, he did it for his family. He wanted to keep Mo working. He wanted to keep the team alive. The people at Columbia were first reticent about it because they said, well, we've got some really successful Shemp shorts here. And Shemp shorts, you can see them online, and there's collections that are being sold now. He was getting really good by 1946. His stuff was better than the Three Stooges because Shemp was a good he was a real great comic actor is what you find. He was the only one of the Three Stooges, I think, that could survive outside the group. He wasn't a caricature like Mo was or
Right.
Larry or Curly. He was an actor. He was a great dancer. He was great on his feet. He was an ad-libber. He was, and
there was more. I know it sounds funny. There's a lot going on there. What's also interesting is for a guy like you talk about this guy, he is got a lot of talent. He's a mensch. He works like a motherfucker. And for a while, before he went and rejoined the Stooges, he was known as the ugliest man in Hollywood.
And that was a title that he was very proud of. That was a publicity stunt while he was making the picture, Butch Minds the Baby, a Damon Runyon picture starring Broderick Crawford.
Right.
It was one of these films where they collected all these mugs, all these leather-faced former boxers and everybody in there to play those Damon Runyon type characters.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And so somebody came up with the idea to say that there was a contest and who won as the ugliest man, but Shemp. And he was proud of it. He said, yes, and I'm a groundhog. I'm as ugly as they come. But I also found at that time that was a title that people wanted. There was the ugliest man in baseball. Mike Mazurki was calling himself the ugliest man in wrestling. So I guess being the ugliest man was quite an honor in those days.
What a weird affectation. Give me time. You go out there, son. You work hard, and one day you'll be the ugliest man in Hollywood. It's so insane. Then he goes back, he rejoins the band, and he's with the Stooges for a long time.
Yeah, he was with them until 1950, until he died.
Right.
And when he died, after he died, he appeared in 4 more.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get into that. the legendary concept of fake Shemps, which is now a cultural touchstone.
Yeah, but again, it was a thankless job that he took because first of all, how do you replace Curly? And second of all,
was Curly as popular then as he is like when we were growing up, everybody was like, yeah, it's Curly. He was the guy. Was he as popular then? Were the Stooges as popular then, or did they gain fame when they were syndicated onto television?
they maintained their popularity, let's say, on the road up until the early 1950s. It started to wane. But when, for instance, the first time that Curly got so sick that he had to be hospitalized, they're about to perform in New Orleans. This was in about a year before Shemp rejoined the group. Mo convinced Shemp to come down to New Orleans and fill in for Curly. So in the local paper, they had a picture of the Three Stooges. It's out there somewhere. People have it. They just pasted Shemp's head over Curly's picture in the advertisements. Went down and he played in New Orleans, and they were going to continue the tour around the country. But the audiences rebelled. Where's Curly? We were here to see Curly.
Okay, so he was.
And
a
they
big
canceled
deal,
the tour. Yeah. He was the star then. Yeah, and they canceled that tour.
Wow.
But again, but especially once the show went into syndication, Curly was the star. And Screen Gems owned the Three Stooges trailers. They were the ones who syndicated to television in the early 60s. And the first few batches, the first maybe 75 or 100 episodes or shorts, were Mo, Larry, and Curly. And of course, right. Curly was a star of every kid. And then one day, here come they throw in the Shemp ones, and people are like, who's this man? We want Curly. And so there was a rebellion among kids everywhere.
Yeah. And there is something about Curly that kids just gravitate to. I mean, every kid does that.
Yeah. I mean, he barked like a dog. He spun on the floor. He was a big kid.
Do any kids nowadays have any knowledge of the Stooges whatsoever?
I don't think so. I mean, anything in black and white, they don't. I asked my daughter if she knew who the Three Stooges were. She didn't know who they were.
Yeah, it's interesting.
He's 23.
And I also think that came with the advent of for this generation, your daughter's generation, my daughter's generation, gaming has supplanted watching television as the sort of the default leisure activity. The default passive leisure activity is not kicking back and watching television. It's gaming. And when they do watch television, they watch a show. Like my kids was like, I'm watching Grey's Anatomy, and they just watch 9 seasons of Grey's Anatomy on their computer. So the viewing habits have really drastically changed. I hope that there's some way that these things are preserved for people, because they are truly fascinating. I wonder if they'll come back, like in another generation, they'll find a way to resuscitate them. As a Stooges aficionado, I think one of the strangest chapters in that story was the Farrelly Brothers Three Stooges movie in the I believe it was in the early 2000s, because it wasn't a biopic about the Three Stooges. It was just another Three Stooges movie.
Yeah. And you had these Three Stooges, these, three Jewish boys being up in a Catholic orphanage. Yeah. which also was pretty bizarre. So the stranger thing about that.
Well, you got to write what you know. Peter and Bob are writing what they know. And by the way, I'm not putting it down. I applaud it. Talk about a big swing. Well, they tried it with the Marx. They tried it with the Marx Brothers in like the 80s or 90s, didn't they?
Brain Donors.
Yeah.
Loosely based it was a 1992 comedy, released by Paramount, loosely based on the Marx Brothers' Night of the Opera and Day of the Races, with John Turturro, Mel Smith, and Bob Nelson in the approximations of Groucho, Chico, and Harpo.
Yeah, they did what the Farrelly Brothers did. It was like, let's try another one.
Yeah, executive produced by the Zucker brothers.
Yeah, I get it. Same, similar.
Yeah.
Similar. If the Monkees can do the Beatles, why can't Brain Donors do Duck Soup?
I was going to say about the Three Stooges movie. Originally the cast that had been set up was Benicio del Toro as Mo, Sean Penn as Larry, and Jim Carrey was going to play Curly.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, I remember both of these, and I might have even read for Brain Donors.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, which would have been a disaster. And then they all fell out and they went somewhere. What's interesting is Benicio del Toro ended up doing a remake of The Wolfman, recreating the role of Lon Chaney Jr., the original comedy partner of Shemp Howard. It all comes together.
It's all connected. That's great.
Yeah. But all those, I look for the current versions of, and it now, because mass entertainment is so fragmented with, I don't know. No one knows what it's going to look like or what it's going to be if this era is done. But people like the Marx Brothers, the Three Stooges, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, they were, to us, they were like the pantheon of film comedy that we all grew up watching. And now, people just don't know it. But like my daughter, when I was 22, I knew all of those people. My daughter plays Valorant, which is a role-playing game. And that's what she does. And she goes to movies, but when she has time to sit in front of a screen, that's what she's doing. It's an interactive narrative. It's just an interesting, cultural evolution. But it's great that this stuff is being, hung on to and recorded.
Yeah. And there's still a huge Three Stooges community, Three Stooges fan base out there. They keep releasing, in various forms and various formats. A lot of Shemp shorts are out there. All the Three Stooges shorts are out there.
Yeah.
They've got that. I think, interestingly enough, this book that I wrote, I think I'm probably the first person to write a book about the Three Stooges who's not part of that fan community.
Right. It's not a hagiography.
And that was the thing. This started out as a biography project, but once I started digging into it, I was finding all these dates and facts that didn't add up. I found that of all the entertainment acts from the 20th century that still resonate today, there were very few that are so wrapped up in mythology and misinformation as this history of the Three Stooges.
How so?
Misinformation.
How so?
Just about every book written about the Three Stooges is written by somebody who's a fan of the Stooges. And they all go back to the Bible. And the Bible is a book called Moe Howard and the Three Stooges. Later it was re-released as I Stooged to Conquer. It's Moe's autobiography. He died before he finished it. I like to say that I like to say that the Three Stooges are like a religion. And of course, like many religions, they go back, the teachings are based on a book, and that book is basically always fiction.
It's all bullshit.
And Moe's book is basically,
it goes from bullshit passed on verbally to bullshit written down to bullshit carved into marble.
Yeah. And, in Moe's story, in Moe's story, he was the leader of the gang from the beginning. He met his friend, Ted Healy, his childhood friend, hooked up with him on stage, saw Shemp in the audience one day, invited Shemp on stage.
Saw his own brother.
He'll never forget the day that he was sitting in Chicago at a nightclub with Ted Healy, and there was this little guy on stage sawing away on a violin with his hair sprung out like a porcupine. And he looked over at Ted Healy, and Ted Healy looked at Moe and said, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And Moe said, "I'm thinking what you're thinking. We got to hire this guy for the act. We need this guy, Larry Feinberg." And Moe never forgot that day. And he talked about it on the Mike Douglas show. He wrote about it in his book. It wasn't true. Shemp, that was Shemp and Ted Healy. Moe wasn't in the act. Moe leaves out the fact that he quit the act from 1925 till the end of 1928 to sell real estate with his mother.
Yeah. Because he got married and had a kid, had a straight job.
And so he,
Howard Realtor.
And Moe Howard, he outlived his brother Shemp by 20 years. And when the Stooges had their renaissance, when they were on television and, through the 1960s, Moe was the spokesman and Moe is the survivor. He got to tell his story. I get it. He was the last guy to
he was the last guy standing. So what he said was the truth.
Yeah, because there were never interviews with Larry. Well, Larry wrote a book, which it turned out he didn't actually write. He had a co-author who made up all the stories, copied what Mo had written, was writing. And
is the name of the book? Go on, Mo.
No, actually, the name of the book is A Stroke of Luck, which was written after Larry had his stroke.
Of course. I have a photo of Larry Feinberg in the Screen Actors Guild retirement home. And he is standing with two of his friends, James Doohan and William Campbell. James Doohan was Scotty on Star Trek, and William Campbell, of course, appeared on several episodes of Star Trek. He was the Klingon commander, and I think The Trouble with Tribbles, and he was also Trelane in the episode The Squire of Gothos. He was a pretty well-known character actor in the 60s. These guys were working actors, and they were apparently friends with Larry Fine. William Campbell's wife was Judith Campbell Exner, who also had an affair with John F. Kennedy and Sam Giancana. It's like there's only 20 people. But those like weird, it's like a murder case board. You're tying strings to people. Bruce Campbell told me when he and Sam Raimi were in high school, and I think Sam Spiegel as well, I'm kind of butchering this story, but this is the gist. They were in college in Michigan. They called the Screen Actors Guild home and asked for Larry Feinberg. And they go, hold on. And they go, hello? And they, hey, Larry, we're kids in college in Michigan. We're film students and we love you. We just think you're great. And he's like, yeah, you guys stay in school. Like he was just like a nice old guy. And then according to Bruce, at one point, Larry just goes, hey, Jesus Christ, it's 4:30. But Sam Raimi specifically is such Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are Stooges movies. They introduced, well, I don't know if they introduced it. They might have introduced it. I know Dead Alive, I think, came later. The idea of slapstick horror, which is still the substance is absolutely has slapstick horror in it.
Yeah.
Where it's Stooges gags with blood.
And they also invented the term the fake Shemp.
They did.
Which came from those 4 pictures that Shemp made after his death.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. It's now we're getting into my territory. We're getting into the Dr. Tom Mason era of the we're getting into the Dr. Tom Mason chapter of the Shemp era Stooges oeuvre. Shemp died, and again, cause of death was,
well, the cause of death, according to reports, was a heart attack.
Right.
But according to his family, according to his daughter-in-law, who's still alive today, who said she was there, it was a cerebral hemorrhage. That's what killed Early.
A brain bleed.
Yeah, and a brain bleed is also how Larry eventually died after his strokes. So when you look at it, Curly, Larry, and Shemp all basically died from cerebral hemorrhages, basically from whacks to the head. Mo was the only one who died. He died of cancer. And he was the one who said, and he said it many times, I was a smart one. I took Ted Healy's place.
He didn't get hit that much.
I didn't get hit as much as they did, especially on stage. That was
he did the hitting.
They used sound effects and they did some deflections on camera, but when they would go out on stage, they didn't have the sound effects, and they would still.
And it had to hit, hits. And the noise had to reach the back of the house.
The back of the house, I had to hear that. I spoke to Nick Santa Maria.
We got to sit. It is highly possible that Mo Howard killed Curly, Larry, and Shemp.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you look at it, by even just forcing them on the road, there's one.
Yeah, just working them to death.
I mean, there's one interview from 1951. I actually started it, the book with it. They were appearing in Baltimore, and a local news reporter got them on the phone backstage, And it's the only time you really hear Shemp being interviewed in his own voice, and Larry too. They're not putting on any characters. And they say, how are you all doing? Oh, we're doing great. Are you guys taking care of Mo? And they're like, no. Mo takes care of us. Why you don't hit Mo? No. Mo hits us, and he hits us for real. And Larry says, I'm he who is hit. I'm the one who gets hit. Because Larry actually had scar tissue and rough skin on the left side of his face, which some said it was because he played violin. It was from holding the violin, but which he said was from all the slaps that he took.
I'm sure. Sure.
And Shemp said, if you don't believe us that Mo hits us, just look at the lumps and bumps under our eyes, and which you could see.
Yeah, because they're poking them under the eyes all the time. Yeah, it is. It's a brutal way to make a goddamn living, is what it is.
Yeah, and they were old. They were old school vaudeville performers. Rough and tumble. They were used to that.
Now, someone said this might be apocryphal, that there's footage of them filming, behind the scenes footage of them filming. It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and the Phil Silvers connection, and supposedly Mo was like, "Now, Larry, darling, I'm going to come around and hit you on the head." It's very urbane. Yes. And then I'm going to take this frying pan and the claw hammer. Just like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I hope it's true. And they had a cartoon series in the 60s.
Well, they did. I mean, they had a whole renaissance in the 60s.
Yeah, they just kept going.
And it's funny. By then it was Mo, Larry, and Joe DeRita, right?
Right.
It was Curly Joe. And they had this new audience. And I remember coming home from school, watching the Three Stooges and then hitting my brother on the head with a hammer. And my mother saying, you can't do that. They realized they had, they didn't have.
You're going to kill someone.
Yeah. They had an audience
Ask
of
Mo.
Children, which they didn't have an audience of children in their heyday.
Yeah.
They'd show a Stooges short before a James Cagney picture, right, or a Bogart film. So now they had kids. And it's on YouTube. There's an interview that Mo's doing where he's explaining to the reporter, look, kids, don't do this at home. As you can see, we don't really poke each other in the eyes. We don't really hit each other on the head. Yeah,
that's right. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Especially now the children are watching us. Please, children, no. Don't ever hit anyone in the head, children. It's so fast. It's so fast. So when you pitch this to the publishers, were they like, "What, you just did the Marlon Brando biography, not you want to do what?"
Well, as it turned out, this particular publisher, this editor at Applause Books, was a big Three Stooges fan, and and a Drew Friedman fan as well.
There you go. Yeah, you got it.
Because Drew is, Shemp was his muse.
Sure.
And so, yes, they were very excited about Shemp.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
They found out today is going into its second edition. It's a new printing already.
But here's the thing. You look at it, like I have it on display at my house just because the cover is so great and the exclamation point. It knows what it is.
Yeah.
And, but you're like, oh, this will be interesting. And then it's, as somebody in show business, it's fascinating. It's like warfare. It's like the way that soldiers are now with night vision and air support and earpieces telling them where to go. And then like these guys in World War I who are living in mud and their feet are rotting off. And, it is like what people had to do to make a goddamn living. It's very educational to read because it helps you see the world today through a different lens. Like, yeah, things are miraculous and they also suck. And that's the way it's always been.
Yeah.
Everything happens again and again and again and again and again. That's the one thing is everything is cyclical. Everything is cyclical. The Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers were not really contemporaries. The Marx Brothers heyday was in the 30s. The Three Stooges heyday was in the 40s. Did they ever cross paths? Is there any? They
crossed paths at the time that the Stooges first came to Hollywood, when they were going to be making a film with Ted Healy, which was called Soup to Nuts. This was their first picture. They weren't called the Three Stooges at the time. I don't even think they got billing, although they were his co-stars in it. When they came to Hollywood, again, they put them to work. They had them perform at a bunch of shows at a theater in downtown LA, along with the premiere of the latest Marx Brothers picture. And so people got to see the Three Stooges on stage compared to the Marx Brothers on screen. That was as close as they came, I think. But it's interesting that the Three Stooges have survived, today, that they're popular today, while the Marx Brothers have sort of faded away in the public consciousness.
And this is a very cynical take. The Stooges are very primal, lizard brain appeal.
Yeah.
And the Marx Brothers are a more high-minded intellectual appeal.
Yeah.
And that's out of vogue.
Yeah.
And also just like kids didn't watch the Marx Brothers. Kids watched the Three Stooges.
Right.
And you carry that stuff throughout your life.
Yeah. And that's the Shemp issue as well, is where kids identified with Curly. I think it was later, my generation grew up in the 1960s. You loved Curly when you were a little kid. Then you grew up, you went through Nixon and Watergate and punk and Vietnam and disco. And then by the 70s, you're in college, you grow up and, hey, Shemp is cool. Shemp is punk, and I think that's where people, as you got older, you started to appreciate Shemp. Yeah,
I did appreciate exactly for that reason. And the fact that they were adopted by, and you say this clearly, that's how I got to appreciate them later in life, through Drew Friedman and the way that sort of punk aesthetic adopted Shemp and Larry. I love to watch Larry react. It's a lot of Larry. Actors can learn a lot about Larry Fine, because Larry Fine knows he is not the focus of the attention when Mo is slapping Curly, but he is 100% in that scene. It's really great to see.
And interesting, Larry had originally been trained by Shemp. When Shemp, when Larry was first discovered and brought onto the Ted Healy show, Shemp saw that as his excuse to quit and go out on his own once again. He went off on his own for a while, but first he stayed and he trained Larry in the role of the stooge for Ted Healy.
Really?
Which is also, a forgotten thing. When you look at Shemp's influence on the group,
Yeah, no, it's true. So what are you working on now? What's next? What's in your sights?
Well, let's see. Where do I go after Shemp? Right now, I'm producing and editing a documentary on another great comedian. Not really. His name is Frank Lucas. He's the Harlem drug dealer that Denzel Washington portrayed in the film American Gangster.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
I'm doing that with my friend, Legs McNeil.
I know. Then
please kill me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Legs and I are working on this documentary that should be coming out in the beginning of 2025. And I'm looking for that next book, looking what to do next. I have a great agent and coach, Lee Sobel, who's always reminded me, you've got to write about someone that people have heard of. But I'm saying, but I really want to do that Richard Deacon book. I think now you can't do Richard Deacon, but he's got a great story.
You're like, but I say, as somebody who has a Dr. Zayas inspired talk show, I know what I like.
Yeah.
I go to where I like. I just did an interview for a guy who's doing a Rod Serling bio. I like what I like.
Yeah.
I like what I like. This is the stuff that interests me. So why would I want to write about something that doesn't interest me?
Yeah.
We'll
see what the next one is.
You'll know when you know. David Lynch talks about this, and it's really true. Ideas are like fishes, he says. You catch them. And, I'm writing something and I was stuck on, I was missing, it was missing something, but I didn't know what it was, thematically. And just driving in the car one day, and I like to drive because I'm too neurotic. I'm too antsy to just sit. But driving, I get to do nothing while doing something, so I can relax. And it just came to my head. That's it. That's what it is. And yeah, it's one of those things you'll know it when you know it. Maybe it's the long awaited Lux Interior biography the world has been.
There you go. Yeah. There are a lot of people to write about that have great followings that people don't realize until that book comes out and all the fans.
Yeah. And to see, to see, especially with, obviously we're in show business, to see what it was like allows you to see the contemporary world in a more, in a better context.
Yeah.
For people, for the people who weren't happy with the results of the recent presidential election, who think the world is going to hell, knowing history is comforting because this is a cycle. We've been through the cycle before. Doesn't mean it's good, but it's certainly not new.
We've had stooges before.
WWE, Linda McMahon is the head of the Secretary of Education.
There you go. Yeah.
WWE, Three Stooges. It's torn from today's headlines. When is your documentary going to be done? Do you know?
We're in post-production now, so it'll probably be together at the beginning of 2025, we hope.
Excellent.
And then we'll be on to the next thing. Interesting. This is probably happening before the podcast, but an interesting thing is I'm doing an appearance with my friend Ray Richmond. Ray's an entertainment writer. He's got a new book out called The Sopranos, The Complete Visual History. And we're going to be doing a podcast and also doing a couple of appearances, I hope, about the influence of the Three Stooges on The Sopranos.
Huge.
And the slapstick violence of The Sopranos, which David Chase talks about.
Sure. And people don't appreciate how funny The Sopranos is. Intentionally funny. The two examples that immediately come to mind is at one point, Tony sits down with Christopher, goes, "I want to talk to you." And Christopher goes, "Is this about the Easter baskets?" And he just goes, "I don't want to even know what that is." And the other one is when Christopher wanted to be a movie producer, his production company was Lone Wolves. I mean, that's amazing.
No, there are people that argue that The Sopranos is a comedy, and you can see that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff
that allows for the violence. You love the characters; they're so funny.
And I believe David Chase's first TV job was Kolchak the Night Stalker. I think that was his first job.
Yeah.
And I remember walking into the Emmys with, at the time, my wife was an agent at UTA. So I was walking in with the UTA group and David was with UTA. And I just was walking next to him. And I just said, I said, I wouldn't say this if it wasn't true. I was watching Kolchak the other night. And I wasn't sure if he was going to oh my God, but he turned to me and he went, "Does it hold up?" he was such a writer. How is it? Still work? Yeah. Lovely man. Of
course it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, where do you want people to go to get this book? It's the holidays coming up. If you're a dude and you're a dude who likes this podcast, you either want to read this book or somebody that wants to unwrap this book on Christmas because it's the perfect gift for men of a certain age.
Yeah, open up the wrapping and see that face looking at you. That's for sure.
Something else. Where do you want people to go to Amazon? Do you want people to go to a bookstore? Do you want people to go to birdkearns.com? What's your website?
I always want people to go to their local bookstore. Hopefully they will have it. Of course, it's
America has 10 of them. We should visit them all.
It's doing very well at Amazon. There's birdkearns.com and there's shempbook.com where you can also see Shemp movies and Shemp shorts.
Excellent.
We put there. But hopefully it's wherever books are sold, and ask for it by name. Shemp with an exclamation point.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould Hour.
We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour. Brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out. You want me? Peace out. Boom.